A very good morning to you. It is 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 10th of January. You are very welcome to Breakfast with Stephen and Isabel.
Well, today, Rishi Sunak's leadership is facing yet another major challenge as he faces his first Prime Minister's questions of the year.
Breaking overnight, 30 Tory rebel MPs are set to back amendments that toughen up Rishi Sunak's flagship Rwanda policy, with politicians claiming the stakes could not be higher.
The architect of the faulty Horizon IT system has reportedly demanded immunity before appearing in front of an inquiry on the post office scandal that saw more than 70 sub-postmasters wrongly convicted of theft and fraud.
Now hand over the cash. Disgraced former post office boss Paula Vanells is facing calls to return bonuses reportedly worth millions of pounds after giving up her gong following a huge public outcry.
Yes, we are expecting an update today on government plans to speed up compensation and the quashing of convictions, while questions mount about Fujitsu, who turns out have been awarded billions of pounds in government contracts since these problems first came to light. Also, pressure on Paula Vanells to hand back some of her bonuses when she was post office boss.
Retailers warn high street prices will remain steep following poorer than expected profits over the festive period.
And in other news on Breakfast, we're out with the army of gritters this morning trying to keep the country moving as the big freeze continues.
Start our winter service back in October. We fill the salt barns, so they're ready to go. We've done about 13 or 14 runs since October, but looking at the week ahead, you're right, the snow is coming and the temperatures have dropped.
Well, keeping you abreast of all the weather this morning is Alex Deacon.
There's a bit more cloud around today, particularly in the northeast, with one or two scattered showers. Sunny for some, cold for all. Join me later for a full forecast.
And with all your sports updates, as always, it's Paul Coit.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Carabao Cup semi-final first leg. Middlesbrough beat a lacklustre Chelsea 1-0, but then there's another leg to go. First transfer of the window has taken place, and Wolverhampton Wanderers are going to be playing the kids. And there we are, literally playing the kids. They start them young these days. There we are. More about that we'll do in about 20 minutes time.
They're probably still at about 20 grand a week.
Yeah. Can you imagine the amount of sweets you could buy with the money they earn
Oh,
these days?
lovely stuff. Paul, thank you. If you want to get in touch, we would love to hear from you today. gbviews@gbnews.com. Here's something a little bit different for you this morning, because there's lots of heavy stuff about today. But I'd love to hear from you about your dog's name.
Oh.
There you go. It's as simple as that. But there's a new survey out, top dog names of 2023. And I wonder if you're amongst the list here. Guess what the first one is? Top one is? Most popular dog's name.
It's not Rex, is it?
And it's not Rex.
OK,
no.
what is it?
Lulu. Sorry, no. No, it's not.
OK.
It really isn't. It's Luna.
Luna.
Luna, if I get my glasses sorted out. Luna, and it's been top name for a couple of years. Second is Teddy.
OK.
Third is Milo.
Oh, phew. Do you know why?
Why?
Because when I told my mum I was calling my daughter Poppy, she said, you can't call her Poppy. I said, why? She said, because Poppy's in the top 3 dog names every year.
No.
Not anymore, Mum.
No, it's top 7.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, so you've got Milo, Lola, Coco, Daisy, Poppy.
I like all
Buddy,
of them.
Bailey and Willow. I know Bailey. There you go. I did think of you when I saw Poppy.
Did you? Little pop star popped up in there.
Dear me. So there you go. So let us know what your dog's name is. Is it common? Like
Or is
this?
it original like
or is
yours?
it like original, like Rex? Well, it's not. I mean, Rex is hardly original for a dog, but it's a proper dog's name.
Unlike Poppy. Very welcome to the show. We are leading this morning on a rebel wake-up call to the Prime Minister. We were talking a lot about this just before Christmas, the Rwanda bill. It's a flagship policy for the Prime Minister. He was very keen to try and get it through the Commons. He managed to, without any votes against him from Conservative MPs before Christmas, perhaps surprisingly given all the noise around the time. But now...
Well, yeah, I mean, interesting when they said, well, we'll all back it. However, what we want you to do is beef it up before the second reading. Well, now more than 30 Conservative MPs are backing amendments that would stop European judges and human rights lawyers from blocking those deportation flights.
Well, leading the rebels is perhaps surprisingly the former Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, who has warned that the stakes could not be higher for Britain.
So, as the bill returns to the Commons next week, just how much of a problem could this be for the Prime Minister?
He faces his first Prime Minister questions of the year today. It's likely to be a bit of a showdown for him. Let's get some analysis now from former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
I suppose this was to be expected. We certainly got the impression that this was going to be kicked into the new year, these amendments. How likely is it that the Prime Minister will welcome them?
Well, I think he knows the strength of feeling on the backbenches and knows that there is a very strong view from a number of MPs who want the protections in place to be as strong as they possibly can be to make sure that those people that are deported won't have a case to be able to appeal. And what tends to happen when that does happen is that, you know, it goes on for days and days, weeks and weeks, months and months, and then it's the taxpayer that has to fund that hotel, it's the taxpayer that has to live with a group of people in the community who aren't quite sure whether they need to be there or not, or whether they'll be deported or they won't. So I think what the group of MPs who are opposing the emergency legislation that the Prime Minister's put forward is to make sure that it is as tight as possible, that those protections are all in place and that there cannot be appeals for people who are deemed for deportation.
I just wonder how the PM will handle this, because he did say previously, well, I think this is as tight as it can be. I've been working on it for years. But if you think you've got something that's going to work better, fine. Well, these MPs think they do. So will he listen to that?
Well, he's got a very tough balancing act to, or a tightrope to tread, really, because he's got this particular group of MPs who want him to go slightly further than the current legislation. He's also got the One Nation group of MPs who think that it goes absolutely as far as it possibly can. So who can he listen to? And it's about him now trying to, I think, pick off both sides to say, look, this is as far as it can go. Back the legislation. Let's not cause a Tory rift at the start of the new year, because divided parties don't win elections. And we know it's an election year. The Prime Minister confirmed that. His working assumption is there'll be an election at the second half of this year. So don't rock the boat in January 2024 so soon.
The Prime Minister's been quoted as saying, I'm open to bright ideas as long as they comply with our international obligations. Do you think these amendments do that? And if not, what's the point of making them? Because they'll only be rejected by the Lords, won't they?
I think that's absolutely right, and that's the tightrope that the Prime Minister's walking, because you've got to make sure that there is an effective appeals process in place, because there may genuinely be, and let's be perfectly honest about this, and I don't want to sort of sidestep the issue, but, you know, take the Post Office, for example. You know, it is a government agency that has been effectively wrong for years and years and years about the postmasters and postmistresses, about who it accused. Let's suppose, for example, the Home Office does get it wrong and it does deport someone or earmark someone for deportation, I should say, who shouldn't be. Of course there has to be a right to appeal. And of course, if you don't uphold your international obligations, then of course Rwanda will pull the plug altogether. So I understand the strength of feeling of those MPs who want it to be as tight as possible, to make sure that there cannot be this merry-go-round of a judicial circus where people do appeal and then they do stay in the country when they should be deported. But there has to be that balance between your international obligations and getting this policy right.
How much do you think this is going to be a Rwanda election? I mean, it's not as strong an issue as the last Brexit election in 2019. But is it going to be big enough of an issue to actually direct things, really, when it comes to all the campaigning?
I think it will be, but in particular areas. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, it's not necessarily the number one issue that most people are talking about. They're still talking about the cost of living crisis. They're still talking about the NHS and the waiting list there. But it does play, obviously, very well in the particular seats that the Tories will need to hold on to if it's going to hold on to power and win the 2024 general election. And that's in the Red Wall, and that's in the North in particular.
Yeah, and if they want to neutralise the Reform UK threat, this is what they need to focus on, isn't it?
Exactly so, because it polls incredibly well with people that are tending to support reform, but also people that voted Brexit, people who voted back to take control of their money, their borders and their laws. And for so long, they haven't seen the government taking any action. So the Rwanda policy and things like, not in isolation, but things like with Rwanda, Bibi Stockholm, and the returns agreement that the government has got with Albania, you know, all of those things add up to a policy that should be quite eye-catching catching and appetising for Tory voters.
The One Nationers are appealing to these 5 families, this rebel group, saying that compromise is how you win elections. Otherwise, the big winners in this will be Labour if people put their votes towards reform. Interesting group of people, this group of rebels in the 5 families. We talked about Robert Jenrick, obviously previously a close ally of the Prime Minister, now leading this very much. But in there as well, Danny Kruger. We'll be speaking to him at 8 o'clock this morning. But just this week, making headlines for saying that the Conservatives will face obliteration at the election. That's not going to help his case, is it, with the Prime Minister? The Prime Minister must be furious with him making headlines with those comments.
I mean, they're not ideal comments to make in a general election year. And I would just sort of appeal to people, you know, like Danny, who would know, because I think he worked in Number 10. He was Boris Johnson's political secretary at times, at a particular time. But, you know, under Theresa May in 2017, you know, she saw the divisions within the party over Brexit. She saw that actually compromise, or tried to appeal to say that compromise is not a dirty word. Compromise is not something that should be sniffed at, because that's what brings the party together, what keeps the government, you know, on the show on the road, as it were. And so I think, you know, 2019 MPs, and there's a few of them, and, you know, Danny's one of them, Miriam Cates is another, Jonathan Gullis, very, very strong local advocates who came in 2019 that might not have seen the division back in 2017, that might need to just sort of hold their nerve.
Just a quick one before we let you go for now. In terms of splits in other parties, they deny it was a split, but Richard Tice last week from Reform, big speech saying, be very careful, you face Starmageddon, right? And then of course the PM said, well, you know, a vote for Reform is a vote for Labour. Nigel Farage on Mark Dolan's show last night saying, well, of course Labour are going to win. Of course they're going to win, and they'll probably be in for 10 years. But this is all about this. You know, this isn't about Reform winning the next election. It's a long-term plan. I wonder what impact that could have, because it sounds like they're arguing on different sides of the coin.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, you hear these predictions all the time. You know, it was supposed to be a decade of Boris we were supposed to have. And look, you know, I remember when Theresa May was 20 points ahead in the polls in 2017. So anything is possible, anything can happen. But I think you're right. The campaign will be focused on, you know, who's actually going to be the Prime Minister at the end of the day. It's either going to be Rishi Sunak or Sir Keir Starmer. A vote for any other party will let in perhaps an alternative through the back door, and you run the risk of voting for anyone else other than Labour or Conservative at the next election, and that might be a detriment to you, your vote, your community, your country.
OK, Charlie, we've got to leave it there, but hopefully we'll
much.
see you a little bit later on.
Thank you.
The other big story of the day, of course, the fallout from the post office scandal is continuing.
Yeah, now, the tech company that built the Horizon IT system has reportedly demanded immunity before appearing at a public inquiry.
Yes, this is specifically Gareth Jenkins. He gave evidence saying that Fujitsu's system was not corrupt, and it helped, that evidence that was used regularly by lawyers, to wrongfully convict more than 700 postmasters.
Well, meanwhile, the former post office boss, Paula Venables, has bowed to public pressure and given up her CBE. She's now facing calls to return millions of pounds in bonuses.
Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who has more on this. I mean, this story just keeps on bringing up new lines and all of this. The Horizon architect demanding immunity will raise a few eyebrows. How on earth can that be the case? The person who created the software that led to all these convictions saying, I'll only talk about this if I'm not going to get prosecutions myself.
Yes, it's quite incredible, isn't it? As more and more details emerge, it becomes even more shocking, if that's possible. So this tech guy who basically invented this faulty Horizon system, he gave evidence saying that it was not corrupt. That directly led to the wrongful convictions of hundreds of innocent postmasters. He is largely responsible for the mess that these people find themselves in, and yet he's saying there is a public inquiry ongoing, and he's basically saying, well, I'm only going to give evidence to this inquiry when you grant me immunity. I mean, just incredible. Also, more questions about Fujitsu, the company as a whole, because it's turning out now that since 2012, the government has awarded them 200 contracts worth billions and billions of pounds. This is a company that's really embedded within our systems. You know, they are in charge of the flood alert system for England, amongst much else. And it seems that they haven't been held to account, and they're still being given all these very lucrative contracts. We are expecting an update from the government today, and obviously Rishi Sunak will be under pressure to elaborate what they're doing to speed up the quashing of these convictions and also speed up compensation. So we should be hearing from the government about this a little bit later.
I just want to run through a right of reply from Fujitsu, who operated all of this. And they say the current Post Office Horizon IT statutory inquiry is examining complex events stretching back over 20 years. Fujitsu has apologised for its role in their suffering. So that's what the companies had to say. Catherine, it is the first PMQs of this election year today. And frankly, even though the Prime Minister's a little bit out of the fray when it comes to the Post Office scandal, I have to say it's going to be a rough ride today for him, isn't it?
Oh, it certainly is. I mean, you know, we're only just back to Parliament. We're only in the second week of the year, and already the Prime Minister under a lot of pressure. I mean, sure, he's not sort of in the firing line, particularly about the Horizon scandal, although that he is under pressure to get this sorted. But clearly, next week, the Rwanda bill is coming back to Parliament. We know that the various different factions within the Conservative parties want very different things. Rebels tabling these amendments. We'll be hearing more from them later. But of course, Rishi Sunak made clear previously that Rwanda itself said that they would pull out of the scheme if the bill went any further than it already does. So they're trying to tread an incredibly fine line. They can't please everybody, of course. They certainly can't please everybody within their own party. If it gets to the Lords, there'll be another almighty row there, let alone if they actually try to get flights to take off. And of course, Rishi Sunak has staked so much on stopping the boats. He's said it over and over again. I think everybody knows that's not going to happen before the general election. But he's desperately in need of a win and would dearly love flights to Rwanda. But at the moment, who knows whether it's ever going to happen.
OK, Catherine, thanks very much indeed.
Right, with the time at 6:17. If you've just joined us, very welcome to the programme. Here's a reminder of our top stories this morning.
Well, breaking news overnight, and 30 Tory rebel MPs are set to back amendments to toughen up Rishi Sunak's flagship Rwanda policy. Politicians claiming the stakes could not be higher.
In other news, police have arrested 13 gunmen who took over a television station in Ecuador during a live broadcast. Live television images showed masked people, some waving guns, inside the studio in the port city of Guayaquil. Gunmen were seen telling staff to lie down and sit on the floor. Multiple gunshots and yells of "no police" were also heard. It's a day after the country's president declared a state of emergency following the escape of one of the country's most notorious drug gang bosses from prison.
United Airlines says it's found loose bolts on plug doors on multiple 737 MAX 9 aircraft during inspections. The airline added that installation issues would be fixed before the aircraft returned to service. Well, that's reassuring. It comes after a section of the fuselage fell from an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 on Friday.
And Stephen Fry has called for the King's Guards to stop using real fur as part of their ceremonial dress. The comedian and actor has backed an animal welfare campaign calling for fake fur to be used instead. These tall black bearskin hats are a familiar sight at military events, including, of course, the changing of the guard. The Ministry of Defence say the bear fur is from legal and licensed hunts.
They actually already make bearskin hats from not bearskin.
Do they?
Not that the army used them, but we've had one in the studio about 18 months ago
Okay.
now. You wouldn't know the difference.
So
you would
why-
not know the
what's the
difference.
point then?
So why use the real? I have to say, why use the real thing?
Yeah.
But there you go. We'll see if anyone listens to Stephen Fry. I think it makes a very good point. Now, bitterly cold start to the week, just in case you hadn't noticed. We've had snow showers across the UK, temperatures falling in some places to -9. So gritting teams across the country have been called into action as they respond to the conditions.
And our national reporter, Theo Jacumba, has joined an army of gritters in Aylesbury.
As temperatures plummet and flurries of snow blanket Britain, most of us escape to their warm indoors, but spare a thought for those who are enduring freezing conditions to keep us safe. Gritting teams like this one in Aylesbury play an essential role in preventing road accidents. By scattering rock salt all over the country, they prevent the formation of slippery surfaces, which could have deadly consequences for motorists. As Britain braces for more snow showers, you may have seen gritters like this one on a road or motorway near you. And this comes as the UK Security Agency have issued an amber weather warning until midday on Friday. If this cold snap has got you losing your cool, there is some welcome news, with the Met Office predicting a return to average temperatures later this week. But with yet more snow forecast, Buckinghamshire Councillor Steve Broadband says they are ready for anything.
So we're really well prepared. We start our winter service back in October. We fill the salt barns, so they're ready to go. We've done about 13 or 14 runs since October, but looking at the week ahead, you're right, the snow is coming and the temperatures have dropped. So we have 25 crews who are ready to go out on our gritting lorries and make sure we grit our primary network.
Forecasters say a brutal Baltic weather front is expected over the coming days as the cold snap continues, testing the true grit of Aylesbury's dedicated team. Theo Jacumba, GB News.
Well, let's talk to one of our favourite weathermen, Jim Dale. Morning to you, Jim. I guess, perhaps it's not been as bad as some of us were expecting when compared to see what we've had in the papers and things, but this preparation is everything, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Looking ahead and making sure you're doing the right thing, taking on the warnings seriously rather than not. But look, let me bring you right up to date as far as we are concerned at this moment in time. So look, it's mainly an ice story this morning. We got a -10 at Aviemore, a -9 at Tulloch Bridge. This is the Highlands and the Grampians. Most of the places around sort of -2s and 1s and 0s, that type of thing. So that's very atypical of the time of year. We might not get to great values today, slightly under, but what you will feel in the south, particularly in the east, is a cold, chilly old wind. Now, the up-to-date bit, we've been waiting for ages. It's us meteorologists looking at how things develop and what we might see going forward. Don't think there's a great deal this week to worry about as far as the snow is concerned. That's say disappearing. It's holding fire for a little while now. This time next week, we are going to see. I think we can now say that there will be significant snow during the course of the middle of next week. There's a cold front that comes down on Sunday that introduces the very cold freezing air. And then we get into the snow fight, if you like, air masses clashing over the UK. That's going to be around Tuesday, Wednesday next week, which is likely to lay down the sort of pictures you're seeing at the moment in more places than saw in the last few days. So it's all to come, and Aylesbury need to be aware because it will be hitting that area as well.
I had to wear socks to bed last night. You know things are bad when I'm wearing socks in bed. My bedroom was 10 degrees when I was going to bed, so that's how cold it's got at the moment. But listen, you're talking about this snow coming next week. Perhaps that will give a little bit of time for the places that are still struggling with floodwater at the moment, the places where there's this time lag. I'm thinking of the West Country, around Tewkesbury, and perhaps on the Somerset levels, where we know often they have flooding for a long time after the rain stops.
Yeah, not just there, but I noticed near me, Marlow area, the same sort of thing with the River Thames. So yeah, these water levels take time to go down. It isn't an overnight sensation where you just flick your fingers and it's all gone. So it's almost like a clash of elements, if you like. The flood water, the rains are still around. They're still making life difficult, particularly for farmers, by the way. So your vegetable price is likely to go up in the next week or two. You'll see that. But yeah, there's a switch change going on. We've changed air masses, so we're now into this colder stuff give or take. It's not, as I say, I don't want to go wild about it. It's fairly normal for the time of year. Unlike what we saw yesterday from Copernicus, the climate people in Europe reporting that we got very, very close, 1.48 degrees to global temperatures above pre-industrial level, now averaging 14.98 degrees C. So that's the thing that sticks out for me. When we talk about the cold, we can also talk about the global warmth, which has been now confirmed. So I think we can very easily say to those that deny climate change is going on, and there will be watchers of this program who think that you're wrong. This is going on, and 2024 could well go in the same direction and beat the 1.5 point.
OK. Look, Jim, good to see you, as always. Let's find out what the weather's doing where you are with Alex.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Pretty frosty out there again for most of us. A bit more cloud across the north and the east, making for a grey and breezy day here. Some places have avoided a frost thanks to that increasing cloud, which is also bringing a few light showers over southeast Scotland, northeast England, pretty scattered, fairly light and of rain rather than any snow. For the south, we've got a beautiful winter's day to look at, but it is cold and there's a brisk wind blowing here as well. That wind, wherever you've got it, across the south or the northeast, really bringing a chill. Lighter winds to western Scotland, some good spells of sunshine on the west coast here. Through this evening, pretty quickly, where we've got the clear skies, the frost comes back. The cloud, though, sticking around over northern England. We'll see a bit more of it spreading to North Wales, northwest England, times through Northern Ireland and across central and southern Scotland. And again, with more cloud overnight, that should help to prevent a frost. But a frosty night across the Highlands and again in the south, -1, -2, even in towns and cities. Rural spots a little lower than that. So again, a chilly day on Thursday, quite a cloudy one over parts of the Midlands, Wales, northern England and southern and eastern Scotland. Again, the sunniest skies, probably the west coast of Scotland, southernmost parts of England and Wales. But for most, it's a dry day. That breeze bringing a chill along the east coast and along the south coast, and temperatures mostly around or touch below average at 6 or 7 Celsius.
Now stay with us. Paul Coyte's going to be joining us for all your latest sport next.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It is 6:30 coming up too. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Isabel. Here's a reminder of our top stories.
It's breaking news overnight. The 30 Tory rebel MPs are set to back amendments to toughen up the Rwanda policy, with politicians claiming the stakes could not be higher.
The architect of the faulty Horizon IT systems reportedly demanded immunity before answering questions on the post office scandal that saw more than 700 sub-postmasters wrongfully convicted of theft and fraud.
The disgraced former post office boss Paul Naverals is facing calls now to return bonuses worth millions of pounds. That's after she gave up her CBE following a big public outcry.
And in other news on breakfast, we're out with the army of gritters this morning, trying to keep the country moving as the big freeze continues.
Start our winter service back in October. We fill the salt barns, so they're ready to go. We've done about 13 or 14 runs since October, but looking at the week ahead, you're right, the snow is coming and the temperatures have dropped.
Retailers are warning that high street prices are going to stay steep following poorer than expected profits over the festive period.
Now, the MP for North Devon, Selene Saxby, is teaming up with the RSPCA and the Dogs Trust to deliver part of the original Animal Welfare Bill. It aims to end puppy smuggling as well as the illegal importation of cats and ferrets.
Yeah, good on her, actually. Jeff Moody finds out how widespread the issue really is and why this is actually a personal crusade.
The RSPCA says it's delighted. Legislation to tackle pet theft, puppy, kitten and ferret smuggling, as well as the import of dogs with cropped ears, had been kicked into the long grass. But it's back, thanks to North Devon MP Selene Saxby.
Puppy smuggling was something that became a huge issue during the pandemic, and it hit my inbox regularly. It's been a campaign that's been run by the Dogs Trust, the RSPCA and others right the way through, and anyone looking back on my social media will see I've been supportive of it the whole way through. I know it's popular, and it's popular almost with everybody. It's not a bill that I think will be contentious.
It's a private member's bill. MPs can add their names to a ballot, and the successful bids get to present new legislation before the House. Government's Kept Animals Bill had been scrapped, but thanks to Selene Saxby and her private member's bill, at least part of the legislation has a chance to become law, something Becky Bristow from the Dogs Trust thinks is needed.
There has literally never been a more important time for the enforcement of animal welfare. For us, obviously, that's in relation to dogs. More and more dogs are being purchased. They're being purchased online. And just no traceability, because people understand. They understand that they need to be able to protect the breeding females and know where their puppies are coming from.
Importing puppies into the UK is a lucrative business. Smugglers can sell their puppies much cheaper online and often take the dogs from their mothers too young. They're not vaccinated and can come across to the UK in appalling conditions. All sorts of health issues can affect them. More than 66,000 dogs were commercially imported to the UK last year, according to Animal and Plant Health Agency figures. Border authorities say they've seen a 260% increase in the number of young puppies being intercepted at customs. 69% of UK adults say more needs to be done to stop the practice. Selene Saxby's right, it's popular.
It's a huge privilege, and I am very, very grateful to have come high in the ballot. I'm not normally lucky in ballots, so it is a huge opportunity, and it's a remarkable thing when I talk to colleagues who've had the opportunity to have legislation laid in their name. It is something I'm very much looking forward to, and I very much hope that we can get it over the line before we get to an election.
The bill is due to be read at the beginning of next month. After that, it will wend its way through the Lords before possibly becoming law. And with a general election looking unlikely before the autumn, the hope is it won't be long before the practice is stamped out forever. Jeff Moody, GB News.
And your puppy names we'd like on the back of that, because the official list is out. Oh, here we go. Where are we? Number 1 is Luna, Teddy, Milo, Lola, Coco, Daisy, Poppy, Buddy, Bailey and Willow. So if you've got one of those...
shall I read out a few whilst we've got it on here?
Go on.
OK, so you've all been sending in your emails with your names, and I have to say, you're pretty original.
Go on.
I'll start with a Poppy, though. I've called my daughter Poppy, so I'll forgive you. It says here, I called my 12-year-old lab Poppy because she'd been dumped at 8 weeks on Remembrance Weekend.
Oh, well, that's nice. You see, I like that.
That's a nice reason for that.
Who's that
their
from?
other one, that's from Angie. She's got 4. She's called her other one Disney because they collected the puppy on the 5th of December, which is Walt Disney's birthday. Lots of thoughts gone into it. And then I want to read a couple more of these ones because they're really good names. My 2 Petite Basset Griffon Vendines are called Gaucho and Bombilla, pronounced Bombisha. And then this one is...
Bombisha!
Bombisha! It doesn't say the name. They say, love the show, love the channel. Thank you. And they say, my dog's name is Garcia, named after Jerry Garcia from the American band The Grateful Dead. You see, people have really had fun with these names.
Yeah, well, why not? Why not? I quite like
All very original.
Quite like that. Keep your thoughts coming through. Paul Coates here. What are your dogs called?
Got Nelly and Dudley. But the thing is, round where I live, every dog is called Coco.
Yeah.
If you go to the Coco, and all these dogs come around, and they're all called Coco. So what is that, number 2 Coco?
No, it's number 5.
Number 5, round my way.
They're all named after Coco Chanel in Essex.
Yeah, see,
that's what they like.
That's what it is. Yeah, it is exactly that. Yeah. But there's not many Rexes, though. That's the old dog.
Oh, Rex. Very old-fashioned. We like a bit of
it.
Rex. Yeah, but he's a big dog, Rex.
Rex, come on, Rex.
Suits him.
Yeah.
Suits him. All right, Carabao Cup.
The Carabao. Carabao Cup. Yes.
I'm sure Carabao's like that weird chocolate you buy in health food shops. It's meant to be healthy chocolate, but it's disgusting.
Is that it? Well, you got your caribou, which is
that
the
might
moose.
Be it.
That's
no,
your
that's a
moose.
moose.
No, I think you're right. I think the actual
Carabao.
cocoa seed is called a cat.
That's cacao.
Cacao. Oh, gosh. Should we stop talking? Let you do the sport.
Yeah, go on, man.
So that's
What's
the
going
chocolate,
on in the chocolate cup?
the moose, and the drink is the Carabao semi-final, the first leg, and it was Middlesbrough against Chelsea. Now, Middlesbrough, 12 injuries, Chelsea, £1 billion team, and Middlesbrough came through and won 1-0. I mean, it was a hell of a cup tie. Chelsea could not score, 18 shots, 5 of them on target. Cole Palmer, who's the new Wunderkind, well, they signed him from Manchester City. A couple of sitters he missed. It was, honestly, they just could not do it, Chelsea. And it was always lovely. A local 21-year-old lad called Hayden Hackney, although he's not from Hackney, he's actually from Redcar, only 21, and he'd been at Middlesbrough since he was 10 years old, scored the winner last night.
Oh, good on him, actually.
Lovely story. But there's another leg, of course, and that's going to be at Stamford Bridge. So Middlesbrough, it's going to be tricky, but why not? You don't know what you're going to get with Chelsea at the moment. And the other semi-final, Liverpool versus Fulham, first leg, that's tonight at Anfield.
We should make this a regular spot. What's happening with the Spurs?
What's happening with the Spurs? I've got out a few little bits. Well, Timo Werner, who was, should we say Chelsea reject? Played at... maybe that's a little strong.
Oh, you're going to be in trouble when you have to
Actually, yeah, I didn't mean that. But, it didn't work out for him at Chelsea. He came from RB Leipzig and left Leipzig and went to Chelsea and didn't have a great time at Chelsea, went back to Leipzig, and now Spurs have signed him on loan. So a fine player. So we'll see how it works out. Hopefully it'll work out. But look
how excited he is there.
That's him. That's him. Just say, can we take your picture? That's proper.
Very snazzy.
Yeah. So there's Radu Dragusin.
Oh yes.
Now Radu Dragusin.
I love the accent.
Who is from?
I live for the accent.
Doing it slightly. He's from Romania. So Radu Dragusin.
Brilliant.
Now,
Anyway, he's
sound like Borat. Just FYI.
let me ask you this: Genoa or Genoa?
I say Genoa.
It is Genoa, isn't it? Because Genoa... No, I don't. Do you know what? It's like, no. So Genoa, he's heading over from Genoa, and Spurs are hoping to sign him as central defender, but Bayern Munich are trying to scupper the deal because they've suddenly come in with their German cash, and they're trying to scupper it. So...
That German cash?
Yes.
How dare they?
I know.
German money.
Well, it's generally European cash, isn't it? So anyway, so Dragusin, it's whether he's going to go to Spurs or Bayern Munich, we will have to see.
You remind me of Count Dracula off Sesame Street.
It's just his looks.
100 million euro. So that's exactly how it's going to be going.
All right, let's talk about Wolves.
Yeah, let's talk about the Wolves kids. Now, 8-year-olds always love it, and I've done this many times at football as well, when the young graduates or the young kids that are going into the academy, they get younger and younger. 8 years old. They've all signed for Wolves, but they had a great, honestly, great trip. Now, this is Gary O'Neill, the Wolves manager, speaking to them.
Oh, yay.
Here he comes.
We're on this pitch here. We're playing against the first team.
Look at these little lads.
Look, he said, you're going to be playing the first team. So off they
They're playing the first team.
Yeah, they're going off and there we are. They're playing against Wolves' first team, and the kids are going, yes, come on. So there we are. You can even see the talent. Look at that one-touch football, straight through. 1-0 to the under 8s. Look at them, they're celebrating the car.
You see, my son's 8. I just know he couldn't keep up with the first team of a proper club. It's incredible the talent these little fellas have.
Honestly, you should see them. They're unbelievable. And but anyway, it's lovely that Gary O'Neill did that. And so as they start there at the club, they've got a long pathway, and then they get to play the first team as well.
But you see, I like that, because, I mean, I don't know if the first team were putting in their best efforts.
I think maybe they weren't sliding in with...
no, not quite. But you know what? The encouragement that will give them.
Oh, the inspiration.
Incredible. It is incredible. And there's a special pathway, and all clubs do this, and they get little treats as they go along. They get, you know, if they get to a certain point, then they get their own locker, and then after that, then you get your own seat, and it's little...
And then they get to 16 and then they get dropped for all the international players and they don't know what to do because they haven't had a proper education.
Oh, give over, Isabel.
You're full of the joys of spring. I hear that story a lot. These British kids that are coming up through these special academies, that all the stars are put in their eyes and then they're being overlooked in favour of the international.
But that's the dangerous thing. If you make it, it literally is 1 in a million. So if you make it, then great. But there's a lot of parents around that think their kids are going to make it and become superstars. You always see it. You know, grassroots football, oh, he's in the academy. It means nothing until they get that far. But there's always one or two that actually do make it.
They're enjoying themselves.
Exactly.
That's the main thing. That's the most important thing, as long as they enjoy playing. And that's what all the clubs say. You've got to enjoy playing it and not looking too far ahead.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Coity, thank you very much indeed.
Stay with us. Still to come, Morrison's have unveiled new CCTV drones to stop booze theft in their stores. Are they not?
No, they just stand there.
OK. Well, we'll get into that in Headline Makers next.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
6:43, good morning to you. Let's have a look at some of the front pages, see what you're getting this morning down in your local newsagent. The Times has ex-Post Office boss Paula Venables returning her CBE following that scandal.
Here's the Telegraph. They're reporting on the IT specialist behind the flawed Horizon software seeking immunity before testifying at the statutory public inquiry.
Cheeky that. The Mail has calls for Paula Venables to return her £3 million bonuses and pension.
The Eye also focusing on all of this. They say Fujitsu's potential £700 million government contracts are questionable.
The Express has the Prime Minister facing a showdown with Tory rebels over Rwanda. What a surprise.
And we're going through the headlines this morning with the former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Very warm welcome.
Good to see you both.
Of you.
Claire, I know you wanted to start with the pictures of Jason Donovan on the papers.
Well, clearly, it's the biggest story. It's
the Speedos and the nail varnish.
Nail varnish.
Well, he was Rocky Horror, wasn't he? He was the star of Rocky Horror, so they're into all that.
It's the thing now. Loads of young people, he's 54 or 56 or something, are wearing nail varnish.
He's just down with the kids.
It's the thing. It's a new trend. Nigel?
Ever tried it, Nigel?
No, I'm afraid not. No way, no.
So, onto the proper stuff. Lots of the papers this morning, Claire, looking at the architect of Horizon IT.
Yes, yeah, the chap who came up with the software for Fujitsu, who claimed in all of the legal action prior to this drama coming out that it was perfectly safe and it was working, it wasn't a problem. And, of course, now it was found to have so many bugs in the system that they did know about it. It could be accessed remotely, but this chap wants immunity from prosecution if he's going to give evidence. Now, I think that that is a ridiculous demand to make. I think if you are an architect of a computer system, you will have knowledge of how it's put together, what bugs you will find, and there will always be bugs in computer systems. There isn't going to be one that comes out straight away that is perfect. But I think to start making these judgments, these demands now, I think shows the worry that these people have about what is going to be found out. And we need to have that laid out. I don't think you can get off and say, please don't prosecute me. I'll give as much evidence as you like. I think we've gone past this point. We really have. People's lives have been absolutely ruined.
Well, some people have taken their own lives, haven't they?
They have.
You can't say, well, what I've done has screwed over more than 700 people, but you know.
But please don't prosecute me.
But the weirdest thing here is it's actually he's refusing to give evidence in the public inquiry. And, I mean, it is possible a prosecution could result from the public inquiry, but the whole point of that is it's a fact finder, and you'd have thought that at the very least he'd want to put his side of the case.
Well, if there's a statutory inquiry, you can be forced to give evidence,
right.
and then it can lead to criminal prosecution. I'm not really sure how he's managed to get away with this. I think there's a lot of criticism regularly for the media, for the press. ITV have done a stunning job in bringing this to the public's attention, and the Telegraph have to be given credit because they went through the legal papers in all of this, found the name of Gareth Jenkins, who was much quoted by these lawyers to prosecute the 700 or so people, and went to his home, I think in Berkshire, yesterday, and asked him how on earth he's managed...
And he refused to say anything.
So there's been some fantastic journalism over the last couple of days, and I do think full credit should be given to the Telegraph for that.
Yes, no, so do I. I mean, it's important to actually track these people down. And the one thing I think is astonishing, I mean, at least Paula Venables has actually said something subsequently in giving back her CBE. But Gareth Jenkins refused to speak to them, so I was just not talking to you. Well, it's a kind of... At the end of that, when you get these sort of no comments or whatever, it's the next sort of question is, well, do you have anything to hide kind of thing?
Yeah. OK, look, on that note, we're just going to leave you just for a second just to run through the headlines at 6:48. And 30 Tory rebel MPs are set to back amendments that toughen up the PM's flagship Rwanda policy, politicians claiming the stakes could not be higher.
And as we've been discussing this morning, the architect of the faulty Horizon IT systems reportedly demanded immunity before answering questions on the post office scandal that saw more than 700 sub-postmasters wrongfully convicted of theft and fraud.
And on that, the former post office boss, Paula Venables, is now facing calls to return bonuses worth millions of pounds. That is after she gave up her CBE.
Well, let's continue going through the papers and focus on what's our top story this morning, Nigel, and it's on the front of the Express as well. And this is what they're dubbing warning shot to the Prime Minister over the Rwanda bill. I mean, I suspect he knew it was coming anyway.
Oh, yeah.
But this group of 30 rebels have come up with some suggestions, amendments that they'd like to see.
Demands, I think, is more the word.
So just tell us exactly what they're proposing and the likelihood that Rishi Sunak will take any notice.
Yeah, I mean, Rishi Sunak is really between a rock and a hard place on this one. That it only takes a little over 30 votes for this bill to be defeated. Both sides, you've got the One Nation group who are the moderates, and they're saying that Rishi Sunak must not go an inch further in what he's proposed. They'll back it as long as it stays exactly as it is. Then you've got the right wing of the party who are saying, no, it's got to go much further, otherwise we'll vote it down. So one way or another, it could be a real problem. The issue that's actually exercising the right at the moment is that they want to close down any kind of legal route for individual appeals. There's also the added thing is there's this notorious Rule 39, which is the European Court of Human Rights action that they can take at the last minute to ground flights, which is what happened in 2022 when our first flight wasn't able to get off the ground. So they want that abandoned, which effectively you're then getting very close to let's leave the ECHR.
But is this ridiculous? And I can understand all the concerns that like One Nation Tories have over some of this, but it does seem whether you agree with the policy or not, if a policy is decided on and runs through, gets through Parliament, and then it's blocked by an outside source, no wonder people are frustrated.
You understand why people are frustrated, but I think this is now taking on a life of its own, and people are conflating so many different issues when you look at the bill. It isn't going to go far enough for some people. Some people would like to see zero migration. That's their starting point. So I think that you're always going to be on a loser with any kind of policy that you put forward. The Prime Minister is in a really, really tricky position as to which group he's going to irritate and which one is going to give him the more grief for it. And I think that's where we are. But and I think Nigel's right on this, it's going to bring up the argument of leaving the ECHR. Now, with Rule 39, what you can actually do, rather than leaving the ECHR, is that you can amend certain parts of it. Now, you need agreement with other member states, but given that this is such a big issue in a lot of other states within the EU, I think there would be a lot of agreement to amend it. So you can have not just an unnamed individual judge, but you can have a named panel that looks at the cases. So you're not relying upon one person, but this is a considered panel, and then it goes back to ministers. There are lots of things.
It reminds me that, was it Brandon Lewis who said that they wanted to break international law in a limited and specific way?
Yes.
I mean, would that be what this is effectively? And does it undermine then the government's? Well, not only I think it has implications in Northern Ireland, doesn't it? If you are doing that, but also does it undermine our position on the international stage?
It does,
we had
hugely.
Lord Cameron yesterday saying, I think there are questions now for Israel to answer about whether they've breached international law. How can he say that?
It's a bit of a difference, though, isn't it? I mean,
well, not really. The whole thing is that we lecture the rest of the world about international law. If we do that and to have any credibility, we've got to maintain international law ourselves. We've got to go along with it. And Parliament can decide various things, but we have an independent judiciary who decide whether it's legal or not. And what Rishi Sunak has said, effectively, is that we'll decide what is right and wrong in Parliament, and judges can have no part of that.
What about the will of the people?
Well, the law is not about the will of the people.
OK, the will of the people, yes, it is really important, and people voted for Brexit for varying different reasons, and one of those was to control our borders, and they're seeing that not happen. But the will of the people to break international law when there are no consequences to the will of the people. I think you have to be really, really careful. There are lots of things that you would wish to do, that Isabel would wish to do, that I would wish to do, that are going to be very, very different. It doesn't mean that they're within the law, and it doesn't mean that you can do them without consequences. And that's the important part.
I love your thoughts on that. Just to finish off with, because we did tease it, just briefly, Nigel, let's have a look at these Shopocalypse Robo-Security in Morrison's.
These are weird. It's an HD camera, and they stick them around, especially around the alcohol section, which thieves sort of tend to target. What then happens is that if you try and pinch something, there's a 120 decibel siren that goes off, which I wouldn't have thought was terribly welcoming for a store. I mean, what's wrong with sort of human security guards there?
Well, come on, though. These clearly have got 360 degree. We're moaning about how much shoplifting is going on. This will stop it.
But with a kind of a siren going off like that, we'd all be diving for sort of bomb shelters and stuff.
You can't. I think that's a good idea. If it stops it, why not?
But what if it's faulty? I've had so many situations where the bells have gone off as I'm leaving the supermarket. And I'm like, I've paid for everything. I've got my receipt, and I'm so embarrassed. Imagine if you had all the decibels. Oh, I'd never step foot in there again.
Exactly, and I always think if it's one of those mornings where you've got little Mrs. Miggins out going to get her bread and milk and dog food, and she's going past that, it could cause a heart attack.
Oh, God.
You can never trust these things to actually work when they're supposed to.
I think you lot are cynical, and it's a sensible idea. Claire, Nigel, thank you very much indeed. Go outside. We shall monitor you until your next appearance in an hour. We've been talking about dog names all morning. So you've been sending your pictures in this morning. Kevin says this is Brew and Polly.
Oh, look, they're hugging.
Polly is the boxer and Brew is a pain in the backside.
Only you can say that. Nanny Chrissy says, good morning from Bullseye. He is a Jack Russell, 13 years old and the most gorgeous boy. He's loving and loyal to my son-in-law and daughter. They both love him so much. Oh, he looks very cute.
And Bob's been in touch. His son, Callum, is holding up Otis. I don't know what Otis is. It's a bit labbish. Beautiful.
Yeah. So we were talking about the most popular dog names, and I actually have to say the GB News viewers have some really original ones. Keep them coming in.
That's what
we're
like.
loving it.
Let's see what the weather's going to do for you today. Here's Alex.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Pretty frosty out there again for most of us. A bit more cloud across the north and the east, making for a grey and breezy day here. Some places have avoided a frost thanks to that increase in cloud, which is also bringing a few light showers over southeast Scotland, northeast England, pretty scattered, fairly light and of rain rather than any snow. For the south, we've got a beautiful winter's day to look at, but it is cold and there's a brisk wind blowing here as well. That wind, wherever you've got it, across the south or the northeast, really bringing a chill. Lighter winds to western Scotland, some good spells of sunshine on the west coast here. Through this evening, pretty quickly, where we've got the clear skies, the frost comes back. The cloud, though, sticking around over northern England. We'll see a bit more of it spreading to North Wales, northwest England, times through Northern Ireland and across central and southern Scotland. And again, with more cloud overnight, that should help to prevent a frost. But a frosty night across the Highlands and again in the south, -1, -2, even in towns and cities. Rural spots a little lower than that. So again, a chilly day on Thursday, quite a cloudy one over parts of the Midlands, Wales, northern England and southern and eastern Scotland. Again, the sunniest skies, probably the west coast of Scotland, southernmost parts of England and Wales. But for most, it's a dry day. That breeze bringing a chill along the east coast and along the south coast, and temperatures mostly around or touch below average at 6 or 7 Celsius.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel. Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK. We're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Wednesday, the 10th of January. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Isabel.
And here's what's leading the news this morning. Breaking overnight, 30 Tory rebel MPs are set to back amendments that toughen up Rishi Sunak's flagship Rwanda policy, with politicians claiming the stakes could not be higher.
The architect of the faulty Horizon IT system has reportedly demanded immunity before appearing in front of the inquiry onto the post office scandal that saw more than 700 sub-postmasters wrongfully convicted.
Disgraced former post office boss Paula Venables is facing calls to return bonuses reportedly worth millions of pounds after giving up her gong following a huge public outcry.
Yes, the fallout from this ITV drama focusing on this scandal continues. We're expecting an update from the government today about how it plans to right some of these terrible wrongs.
And on Breakfast this morning, we're out with the army of gritters trying to keep the country moving as the big freeze continues.
Start our winter service back in October. We fill the salt barns so they're ready to go. We've done about 13 or 14 runs since October, but looking at the week ahead, you're right, the snow is coming and the temperatures have dropped.
So with all eyes on the forecast over the next few days, Alex Deakin will have you updates throughout the programme.
There's a bit more cloud around today, particularly in the northeast with 1 or 2 scattered showers. Sunny for some, cold for all. Join me later for a full forecast.
And of course, we've got your sport with Paul.
Yes, Chelsea lose at Middlesbrough. Jordan Henderson, he wants out of Saudi Arabia, and colour-blind football fans are not happy with the FA.
It's intriguing.
It is intriguing.
Yeah.
Just after 7:30 this morning, we'll be discussing the big stories making headlines with Nigel Nelson and Claire Pearsall, including a survey that claims drivers' headlights are too bright. I'd agree with that as well.
Brighter the better.
Blind me.
Join in any of our discussions this morning. GB Views at gbnews.com.
The dog names.
Yeah, quite impressive. Will has 7 Cairn Terriers, a ginger one, or an orange one, called Donald Trump. Then he's got Kipper, Sausage, Beans, Chilling, Scruffy and Smokio.
I love it. Steve says, my Doberman is called Doris. And Samantha says her dog name is Doris as well, and she's a boxer puppy, but that's a handful. Brad, my Heidi is a Great Dane who loves laps. I love that. The bigger the dog, the smaller they think they are, I think, sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
You could know all about that.
Yeah. Luke has Larry. I think we can have a picture of Larry, actually, a little bit later on. He's an assistance dog. Happy as Larry, he says. He's a lab. So we'll try and bring that picture up for you. That'll be nice. And Christine has got papillons. Is that right? And they're called Scrumpy Jack, Mr Pickle and Gibson.
Oh, I love Mr Pickle as a name.
Yeah, do you know what?
None of those are in the top 7 or top 10 that you found this morning.
The top 10 all sound really dull in
Luna
comparison.
comes in number 1.
Apparently that's all based on Harry Potter, you know, Luna Lovegood.
Oh, there you go.
So there's Luna, Teddy, Milo, Lola, Coco, easy for me to say, Daisy, Poppy, Buddy, Bailey and Willow.
It genuinely sounds like the register for my children's class list.
Yeah.
It's all the same names as my children's friends.
But Mr Pickle, I don't know how how do you call that when you're out in the park?
Yeah.
I'd be worried about. What I'd be worried about.
Really cute.
Keep them all coming through. GB Views at gbnews.com.
Yes, making us smile this morning when there's a lot of serious news around, not least for the Prime Minister. He's set to face yet another showdown over his Rwanda scheme as dozens of Tory rebels are now threatening to vote against his policy.
Yeah, more than 30 Conservative MPs have backed amendments to prevent European judges and human rights lawyers from blocking those deportation flights.
And leading the rebels is the former Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick. He's warned that the stakes for Britain could not be higher.
Well, the bill returns to the Commons next week, so just how much of a problem is this going to be for the Prime Minister?
Yes, he faces his first Prime Minister's questions of the year today, an election year, likely to be a showdown. Let's get the latest analysis from the former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, who joins us in the studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Between a rock and a hard place, frankly, for the Prime Minister, but I suppose the big question is, will we see any planes taking off before the election?
Well, you're absolutely...
For Rwanda, I should point out.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, you're talking about a Mr Pickle there. I mean, the Prime Minister's in a bit of a pickle over this one, I think, because we saw just before the New Year and Christmas, you know, we saw rebellion when it came to voting on that emergency legislation. He's now got 30 MPs that are still suggesting that they're not prepared to back it. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done now between now and next week when the bill comes back for third reading to ensure that MPs who do have concerns, those concerns are quashed, and that we can, the government can get the bill through and get those planes off the ground.
Yeah, how do you quash those concerns, though? It's like trying to please all the people all the time, isn't it?
It is, and it's either trying to appeal to some who are particularly hardline to say, look, you know, we can't have it all of your way because you've got the other side of the Conservative Party that, you know, and I think that the reality is the Prime Minister has to appeal to everybody to say, look at where he's coming from. He's got a one nation group of Conservative MPs that think that it has gone far enough as it is. So to go any further would be very difficult for him. Can there be room for compromise? But also...
Except, the problem is, if this, I've gone as far as I can, but actually, if it still gets blocked by human rights lawyers on individual cases and the European Court of Human Rights and all that sort of business, then what's the point? You know, it's not getting anywhere, actually.
Well, that's exactly what the one particular group of MPs, the 30 that are rebelling, are worried about and frightened about and don't want to see happening. They don't want to see external judges and, you know, foreign lawyers blocking those flights or blocking people that need to be deported to be deported. Exactly so. But on the other side, if you go too far and you end up sort of breaking international law, then you've got Rwanda as a country that said that it would pull out of the scheme altogether because it wants the UK to uphold international law. So it's a very, very fine balancing act that the Prime Minister has to juggle.
Yeah, and trying to please everybody, but you end up pleasing nobody, perhaps, could be the result. I mean, the One Nationers have said that compromise is in the national interest. The real risk here is to Labour. If we can't agree, we're handing the keys to Sir Keir Starmer. Do they have a point on all of that?
I think they absolutely do, because, you know, at every stage, you know, the Labour government have opposed these proposals. They've opposed immigration legislation that's come forward. And so I think there is a real risk that if the Conservative Party doesn't find agreement, doesn't reach compromise to get this legislation through, something that is a flagship proposal of the Prime Minister. It's one of his top 5 priorities that we all know about, stopping the boats, which is part of Rwanda, part of Bibi Stockholm, which is part of the returns agreement that he's got with countries like Albania. All of that as a package really matters to the Prime Minister. It's what he'll want to go to the country on to say, you know, I said that I'm going to do this, I'm going to stop the boats, I'm going to get Rwanda through, I've done it, you can trust in me, you can trust in the Conservative Party. If that is torpedoed by his own backbenchers, then of course it's game over and you hand keys over to the Labour Party.
I mean, the problem is the optics with this, because it makes obviously the government and the Tory Party look divided, and it makes the Labour Party look united on this issue. Are they really? Do we really know if there's divisions in the Labour Party on migration?
Well, it's hard to say because they don't really come forward with any policies these days, Stephen. And being more analytical about it, they don't need to be necessarily if they're 20 points ahead in the polls, as the polls suggest. But it's a numbers game when it comes to the election because it's those red wall constituencies, people, particularly in the north of England, that voted for Brexit in their numbers. They voted to take back control of their money, their borders, their laws. They voted Conservative for the first time in 2019, leaving Labour because Labour left them behind. Rishi Sunak has got to appeal to those red wall constituencies and seats right across the country to say, you put your trust in us in 2019, I've delivered on the things that really matter to you, which is Brexit and taking back control of your borders. Stick with the Conservatives. A vote for anyone else is a vote for Labour.
OK.
Charlie, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, sticking with problems that the government's facing, the fallout from the post office scandal continues.
Yes, the tech expert who personally built the faulty Horizon IT system has reportedly demanded immunity before appearing at a public inquiry.
Yeah, Gareth Jenkins gave evidence saying the Fujitsu system was not corrupt, and that evidence helped to wrongfully convict more than 700 postmasters.
Well, meanwhile, the shamed former post office boss, Paula Venables, has bowed to huge public pressure to give up her CBE and now is facing calls to return millions of pounds in bonuses.
Let's talk to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who's in Westminster for us this morning. I mean, look, this is just not going away.
It's incredible, isn't it? Every day there's more revelations and they all get more shocking than before. Today, a real focus on Fujitsu and the news that the chap who basically invented this faulty software has refused to give evidence to the public inquiry unless he is first granted immunity. Now, this is a guy who repeatedly said that this system was not corrupt, which led directly to, in some cases, the imprisonment, but hundreds of false, as it turned out, convictions of perfectly innocent sub-postmasters. And meanwhile, Fujitsu is still being awarded government contracts. The papers today reveal that they're earning 100 million a year from the government, so effectively us, the taxpayer, and that since 2012 they've been given 200 government contracts worth billions, and also that they have access to this sort of priority fast-track lane for preferred suppliers. So really quite incredible. And meanwhile, yes, the former post office boss, Paula Venables, has given back her CBE, calls now for her to give back her bonuses, and questions as to why she was given this CBE at the end of 2018. Given by then, it was known that the system was faulty. So lots of questions, not many answers, but we are expecting an update from the government today on how it plans to overturn these hundreds of wrongful convictions at speed, and how it also plans to speed up compensation for those who've been terribly, terribly wronged.
Also, thank you very much, Catherine. Also questions about who should foot the bill. I mean, it's likely to be significant, isn't it, this compensation? Lots of people pointing at Fujitsu would like them to be paying for it. Of course, we ought to give them their right of reply in all of this. They've been saying that the current Post Office Horizon IT statutory inquiry is examining complex events. They stretch back over 20 years. Fujitsu's apologised for its role in their suffering.
Yes, it should be putting their hands in their pockets, actually. I really don't think that's an unreasonable thing to expect, all things considered. Anyway, your thoughts on that, as always. Now, let's have a look at judges in the United States, appeal court judges, apparently unconvinced by Donald Trump's argument that former presidents should be entitled to immunity from criminal prosecution.
Yes, Trump stands accused of trying to overturn the 2020 election result, which put Joe Biden into the White House. He gave a press conference yesterday. This is him speaking after a court appearance. Let's take a listen.
It's a very sad thing that's happened with this whole situation. When they talk about threat to democracy, that's your real threat to democracy. And I feel that as a president, you have to have immunity. Very simple. And if you don't, as an example, if this case were lost on immunity and I did nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong, I'm working for the country, So you can't have a president without immunity. You have to have, as a president, you have to be able to do your job.
Let's talk to Chair of Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson. Look, whatever is thrown at Donald Trump, he often comes out fighting and often comes out looking stronger.
That's right.
This is different because the idea that a president needs immunity actually goes against a lot of what people would want the office of president to stand for.
It's a bit of a stretch, and I think what the president and his team, what they're trying to do is just delay. So they'll throw anything at the court in hopes that it just gets tied up for 6 weeks and that gives him more time. He really wants to delay all of these things until after the election for obvious reasons. So they'll throw any argument at the court. And you have a point, Stephen. You know, with immunity, there's nothing about it in the Constitution. So there's some case law, Nixon v. Fitzgerald from the early 70s, when Nixon actually won, because they argued that immunity was necessary to allow the president to sort of do the things he or she needs to do. But, you know, that's in a civil context, first of all. And secondly, there's nothing about it in the Constitution. The current Supreme Court, which is very conservative by nature, they're constitutionalists. Yeah. And they will look at this and say, there's nothing in the Constitution about it. Let the legislature decide. Let the Congress decide. That's not our job. We don't legislate from the bench. So, interestingly enough, even though Trump has 3 appointees on the Supreme Court, this is a court that I think will side with the prosecution.
Yeah, it's interesting you use the phrase he'll throw anything, any legal argument. I mean, his lawyers actually admitted yesterday that under this argument, a president would be able to assassinate their political opponents, and that would be legal.
Yes,
I mean,
that was
such extraordinary claim.
Curveball, and I think the judges aren't really listening. They're not going to tolerate this, and again, it's just the delay tactic. And remember, Trump's legal team isn't necessarily the best you can get. He's churned through so many lawyers in his career, but also in his administration and since then. And so, I mean, they might be good lawyers, generally speaking, but he doesn't necessarily have the best team.
Is that because if they don't give him the advice he wants, he gets rid of them?
Yes, and there's a big loyalty factor with Trump, and, you know, he's just churned through them, and a lot of his lawyers got into some trouble for... And many of them were subpoenaed. So, you know, there's some risk in being a Trump lawyer. So you'll see that now.
All of that being said, there was some polling out, was it sort of Sunday night, Monday morning, which put him between him and the second runner for the nomination for the Republican ticket. He was on 60 or something, and the second person was what?
20, yeah.
20 or lower.
Yeah,
I mean, he is so far ahead in the polls.
Because
we could be in a realistic position where he gets the nomination, could even be president, but behind bars.
In theory, more likely is that he'll pardon himself, or at the very least, the Justice Department under Trump will stop all of these cases.
But they might come before the election.
That's true, and again, that goes to the delay tactic. These indictments and criminal cases are helping Trump, and I would argue that the left and the media that's behind the left in the U.S. wants Trump to be the candidate. That's clear. Otherwise, they wouldn't continue with the indictments. So it's bumping up Trump. It's really helping him with the nomination. There's no doubt about that.
Well, just a final thought. Yeah. As spokesperson for Republican Overseas, would you like to see Trump back in the White House or not?
Personally, no. I'm supporting Ron DeSantis. I think he'd be a much better president. He's much more disciplined. He's more conservative, frankly. So from a conservative perspective, you want DeSantis. From maybe an electoral perspective, reaching a broader audience, you might argue for Nikki Haley. I think, you know, Trump served a great purpose in 2016. Now is not the right time for him. So, look, I would argue for Ron DeSantis, and I'll continue to argue for DeSantis, even though it seems to be a bit of a challenge right now. We'll see what happens Monday in Iowa.
Ron DeSanctimonious, as Trump calls him.
But he has said, Ron DeSantis has said he would pardon Trump if he gets into the White House, which could leave the door open for Trump to come back in the future.
That's in theory, yes. And you know, again, you can believe that Ron DeSantis would be a better president, but at the same time argue that the weaponization of the justice system is not good. And you know, by going after Trump, they're only helping him in the nomination process.
Okay.
Good to see you, as
Great to be
always.
here.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
indeed, Greg. Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
A sinister story now for you. More than half of child sexual abuse offences last year were actually committed by other children, according to a new police report.
Yeah, that's up from about a third historically, with offences classified as those aged 10 to 17 abusing other children.
Well, police say that this growing and concerning trend is likely fuelled by violent porn and access to smartphones.
Let's talk to CEO of Freedom from Abuse, Marilyn Hawes. Good to see you, as always, Marilyn. I want to kick this off by talking about vicious circles, because how much of that it's been known for a long time that actually a lot of children who abuse have actually been abused themselves and go on to be abused. I mean, it's a really awful situation. How much of that is tied into this, do we think?
Well, I spent time before lockdown talking to sex offenders and paedophiles, and if you look at the Institute of Health visitors, the Institute of Health, their figures say 1 in 8 people who were sexually abused as children go on and abuse. So that means 7 out of 8 don't. Okay, so that is actually a myth. If you've been abused, it does not mean you're going to go on and abuse. The problems here are several. You've got poor funding with early years, closing down 2/3 of children's centres due to poor funding and all that sort of stuff. That's a lifeline for parents to learn about parenting and be better parents, and that is what's creating a lot of trouble in the early years. You've then got social services when schools, and I go into schools, I was a deputy head, when schools actually refer children that they believe have issues, are told, oh, this is just child's play. Show me yours, I'll show you mine. No, it's not. And the case is closed. Then you've got pornography. So we've got 7-year-olds now with an iPhone watching porn, very, very easy to access. I think it's 1 in 4 10-year-olds have watched hardcore porn. There is no soft porn anymore. It's the real awful, awful stuff. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's completely normalising it, distorting their brains. This is why you're getting so much harmful sexualised behaviour in schools. You've got 10-year-olds acting out on the younger children because of what they've seen on pornography. And now you've got children creating their own child abuse images on AI. Now, to reduce this, if parents would just step up and learn about the simple things of putting parental locks on. You can't leave everything to the online safety bill. Parents have got a responsibility. They are buying their children an adult device, not a toy, and they need to stand alongside their children and monitor it better. Get the phones out the bedrooms, monitor them, see what they're doing. Why does a 7-year-old need an iPhone, for goodness sake? It's nonsense.
I think it's too easy, Marilyn, to point the finger at parents in this. I don't know a single parent who would knowingly put their child at risk of any of this. And, you know, to take it, I mean, I totally agree, iPhones are not appropriate for young children, but a lot of, say, 11, 12-year-old kids have older siblings, perhaps they're the youngest of 3, they've legitimately got access to these phones. A lot of this is going on in the school playground. This isn't children at home on devices. This is where the parents aren't there to supervise their children. And we have to live in a world where this kind of stuff just simply isn't accessible for kids, regardless of where they are. And I don't think we should be pointing the finger at parents.
Well, I'm sorry, some of it is, and you're wrong there, because they buy the devices. It's also schools should not be letting these phones come into the playground. It's utter nonsense. Why do they need their phones? It's rubbish. They shouldn't have the phones. And I'm sorry, you're wrong about parents. I train right across the country. We all do on my team. You try and get parents to a course that helps them understand the risks online. You can talk to any school and they will tell you that the take-up is horrific. You could have a school with 600 children and you might get 10 parents attend. They don't think it's going to happen to their child. And there is an accountability for everybody, to the schools to stop the phones going in, to parents to better monitor. Of course, they don't know what their children are doing when the phones are up in their bedroom.
I mean, I don't disagree with you that there is a role for parents in this, but it seems to me that you're focusing your anger mainly at them. You haven't mentioned once these porn websites, which are making an absolute fortune. I mean, in France, you have to produce legal documentation to show your age. It's incredibly hard. This has been brought in. It's very incredibly hard to get onto these sites, and it's been brought in to protect children. We know that the stuff's out there. We have to do better at helping kids.
Well, absolutely. The porn industry is absolutely raking it in. It really is. And then the main thing is based in Canada. So and a lot of this does go down to the government being, as you say, if France has got that in place, why can't we? You know, there's much more attack needs to be happening on the porn industry. And that's why we had the online safety bill. But the other thing is as well, the online safety bill is going to get sort of deal with encryption, trying to get rid of encryption, because currently with encryption, if everything is encrypted, the police can't check back who was the person that first sent the images, who was the person that actually, that's the problem. There's a load of issues here. It's an absolute dog's dinner. But everybody needs to make a better job to help, to help their children understand. So when we go into schools, we are very direct with the children. We get behind the eyes of the children and help them understand what are those hidden harms. And that's what I would urge parents to do, to learn
Marilyn,
how to help.
So I'm sorry to say we've got to leave it there. I mean, it's, as you say, a hugely complex situation, but thank you for your thoughts this morning.
Thank you.
Heck. It just goes to show you sort of think there's easy answers to this. There just isn't.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Now, London, should you want to live in the capital, has been dubbed the slowest city in the world. Is 20 really plenty? We'll discuss that in just a few minutes.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Now, if you're a driver and you head to the capital, you know it's a nightmare. It's always been a nightmare. However, London has now been named the slowest city in the world for drivers, and actually the second year running. This is because of the widespread 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, apparently.
But is this really something to be proud of? And is it time to end the war on motorists? Let's debate that this morning.
Yes, we've got... London campaign coordinator for 20 is Plenty, Jeremy Leach, and campaigner Alan Miller. Good to see you both this morning. Jeremy, why is 20 plenty?
So I think what's really interesting is the way this has come about over the years. Communities have, really wanted lower speeds. Communities have felt it's safer, and the research absolutely backs up. So over the years, we found out that, where you get 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, you reduce casualties by 42%. It's a huge impact. It makes streets quieter, it makes them safe, it makes people want to walk and cycle.
Oh, well, and I can understand the fact when it comes to accidents. I mean, heck, if you reduced it to 10 miles an hour, then it'd be even lower, wouldn't it? However, where's the idea that communities want this? Because when you hear about these low-traffic neighbourhoods and 20-mile-an-hour limits and all the rest of it, people go mad.
Well, that's one side of the story, but the other really is consistently 70%, in all the research, 70% of people say, I want 20 mile an hour on my street. And it's really important because it's not just residential streets, it's those streets that are shopping streets as well. Well over 2/3 of serious casualties happen on high street roads in built-up areas. So it's not just the residential streets, it's really important to tackle the main roads as well.
I want to bring in Alan to all of this. Look, whilst I used to live in a residential part of London where we were cheek by jowl, and you could see the benefits of people driving slowly, because sometimes people would bomb up and there were lots of children around and everyone would think, goodness me, why are they driving so fast? But I drive into work now, middle of the night, busy high street, and I have to go at a snail's pace. There isn't a person around, and I send money to the council if I go at 22 miles an hour. It's a cash cow, surely.
It's definitely a cash cow. It's also the case that our democracy is being hijacked, local authorities and nationally, by a few green billionaires. Underwriting campaigners such as UK 100. We've got C40 Cities with Sadiq Khan, who's the chair of it. What they're doing is limiting any other challenges to these discussions. We've got councils that are doing cash grabs, that are not providing services. And of course, some communities might say, around this school, we might think 20 miles an hour is a good idea. The idea that you suffocate and limit a city to all being 20 miles an hour, to going back to speeds that are really a horse and cart, is preposterous. We're meant to be an international global city, dynamic. We need growth and prosperity. We've just come out of 3 years of lockdown, and some of these zealots are trying to suffocate and limit our cities and our mobility. Alongside low-traffic neighbourhoods and ULEZ, what we're seeing is a war on cars, a war on motorists and a war on public, with surveillance and cameras everywhere. It's unacceptable.
All right, Jeremy, you're suffocating the capital.
OK, I think what I challenge is, I think it's really important to take a step back and just look what impact, fast driving has on a city. More than 100, on average in London, 100 people are killed every year on our roads. 3,500 people are seriously injured. In 2022, the Met Police found that almost half of the fatalities had an element of speed in them. As I said earlier, if you can get maximum speeds in London, in built-up areas down to 20 mile an hour, it has a huge impact.
But Jeremy, why in the middle of the night, when there's not a soul around, people having to... You see all these motorists going 20 miles an hour. It's just... I mean, I was reading the stats. It now takes an average of 37 minutes and 20 seconds to travel just 6 miles in London.
Well, I think there's two things... That's a really good point. There's two things there. First of all, the law in the UK around speed limits is, unless it's on a motorway where there are variable speed limits, it's 20 miles an hour, it's 30 miles an hour. It's that we haven't got variable speed limits. I think on the other issue, What was the other issue?
Well, just the time it takes. I mean, it's just, taking the mickey, really, out of people who are trying to go about their business and they're stuck behind the wheel.
I really understand that. I think what's the research has been, and I think Alan made the point about 20-mile-an-hour limits coming in. I think that's happened recently in Wales. There's research now on the impact on journey times. The journey time impact of 20 mile an hour is really, really tiny. What makes the difference? And everybody who drives knows this. If you go to 30 miles an hour, you just get to the next queue quicker. It's not about the maximum speed.
All right, just a final word, Alan. That's a fair point, isn't it?
No, what we've got is a situation in Wales where emergency drivers, both fire and ambulance, are not able to get to places in a timely fashion. What we've got a situation is roads are being blocked, they're being suffocated. We've got a situation where this is having enormous impacts on our capital city, and it's along safety on the one hand, and we've heard this term in the last few years, keeping you all safe, and net zero, which is about limits and restrictions. The majority of the public don't want this, and that's why together we say they should get involved and actually get their MP and local councillor to sign the pledge for transparency around this.
OK. Look, we've got to leave it there, gentlemen. Well argued on both sides. Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it. Your thoughts would be welcome on that. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, it's terribly chilly out there. You don't need me to tell you that, but let's have a look at just how bad it's going to get with Alex Deakin.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Pretty frosty out there again for most of us. A bit more cloud across the north and the east, making for a grey and breezy day here. Some places have avoided a frost thanks to that increasing cloud, which is also bringing a few light showers over southeast Scotland, northeast England, pretty scattered, fairly light and of rain rather than any snow. For the south, we've got a beautiful winter's day to look at, but it is cold and there's a brisk wind blowing here as well. That wind, wherever you've got it, across the south or the northeast, really bringing a chill. Lighter winds to western Scotland, some good spells of sunshine on the west coast here. Through this evening, pretty quickly, where we've got the clear skies, the frost comes back. The cloud, though, sticking around over northern England. We'll see a bit more of it spreading to North Wales, northwest England, times through Northern Ireland and across central and southern Scotland. And again, with more cloud overnight, that should help to prevent a frost. But a frosty night across the Highlands and again in the south, -1, -2, even in towns and cities. Rural spots a little lower than that. So again, a chilly day on Thursday, quite a cloudy one over parts of the Midlands, Wales, northern England and southern and eastern Scotland. Again, the sunniest skies, probably the west coast of Scotland, southernmost parts of England and Wales. But for most, it's a dry day. That breeze bringing a chill along the east coast and along the south coast, and temperatures mostly around or touch below average at 6 or 7 Celsius.
All right, let's have the sport this morning. Paul Coit is standing by. He's poised and ready to go.
I am poised and standing by. I'm ready and raring. I'm ready and raring.
Like a coiled spring.
I know, Middlesbrough beat Chelsea last night. It's the semi-final, first leg of the semi-final of the Carabao Cup. Great result for Middlesbrough. I think it's fair to say maybe unexpected. A lot of Chelsea fans went up there expecting to win. Chelsea just couldn't score. I mean, they were not good. 18 shots, 5 of them on target. Cole Palmer, who's a fantastic young player who signed from Manchester City, who's been great for Chelsea, he had a couple of sitters, one of them from 5 yards out, which was not good. Middlesbrough, 12 of their first team were out. Local 21-year-old lad by the name of Hayden Hackney scored the winner from Redcar. He's been at Middlesbrough since he was 21. There's a very unhappy-looking Maurizio Pochettino.
He'll be getting a few pints from morning.
I think he probably will. And a lot of the fans were very unhappy, Chelsea, and a lot of the players, including Thiago Silva, had to go over and placate them.
Oh, dear.
It's a long way to go from West London up to Middlesbrough. Anyway, the return leg is going to be next week.
Talking of transferring things along, who are Ajax after?
Well, Jordan Henderson. Now, Jordan Henderson, of course, still playing for England, even though he's moved to Saudi Arabia, plays for Steven Gerrard, who's... I always have trouble with the pronunciation to get it perfectly right.
Yes,
so if only there was someone that could actually pronounce the team that he manages and that Jordan Henderson plays for correctly.
Mahaba, Ana Steven Gerrard. Ana El Etifaki. See you soon.
That can speak fluently. That's why he's having so much success. Well, actually, I say that.
Excellent.
They haven't won in 2 months. Poor Stephen Gerrard and Jordan Henderson. It's just not working out for him in Saudi Arabia. So he wants out.
It's going to cost him to come out.
You know what? It's going to cost him a fortune, because the thing is, if he comes back here, the HMRC are very interested. It's probably going to cost him £3 million in tax. So maybe the Netherlands is the place for him. Ajax are interested. You know, he's still 31, still got a role to play. So I think he wants out.
Ajax aren't going to pay him 700 grand a week.
They won't. No. You've got, I think, 5 times. That's 5 times. It's 350 grand a week is what he's on. So.
Oh, is it?
No, 300.
Oh, I thought it was 700.
I think he's only 300, unless he's playing twice a week.
Well, maybe.
Maybe that's what he is. Maybe he's getting paid double for training. But I think we're looking at around 350 grand a week, and their top player, Steven Bergwijn, is on, well, a lot less than that.
Are either of you chaps colourblind?
No.
No,
okay,
not.
well, there you're
You've heard
lucky.
about this then, have you?
Well, I was just... Apparently this is a big deal in football shirts now.
Well, it is. There was a game in the FA Cup that we talked a fair bit about, which was the Sunderland versus Newcastle United game. Now, I think we may have a clip or a picture from the game, and if you can imagine, if you're colourblind...
Oh, no, we don't.
We don't have that.
No,
well,
but it was stripes, wasn't it?
They're both wearing stripes. Red and white stripes, Sunderland, black and white stripes, Newcastle.
Oh, there we go.
There we are. Look, see, there we are. If you're it's hard... you can understand.
It's hard enough now, yeah.
So all you're going to have to do is be looking at the team with the black shorts or the white shorts to actually determine the difference between them. It's the old John Motson phrase, I think, back from the 70s, that was from the old, if you're watching in black and white, Tottenham Hotspur are the team wearing yellow, which it's pretty similar. But it's a real thing, colour blindness in football.
Yeah, for sure.
And the FA have had a whole
it's 1 in
campaign
12
about
men,
it.
isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's plenty.
But 1 in 200 women.
Wonder why women
there
don't.
you go. See, I thought it was predominantly... Well, it is.
It is predominantly men.
Yeah.
Yes, it
but
is.
Yeah.
1 in 12 to 1 in 200.
There you go.
But they've had a campaign about this, and people that are colourblind have been very unhappy to say, well, this shouldn't be happening, because it does happen, because it's difficult to tell the difference between the teams. Wolves, finally. Should we look at the kids?
Go on.
Should we look at the kids
I think
again?
We've got to.
The kids, the under-8 academy side of Wolverhampton Wanderers. They got a good treat. Gary O'Neill, the manager of the first team, there we are speaking to them.
Oh, look at them all with their smart hair and all looking jaunty and ready to roll.
And he said, we've got a treat. We are going to be playing against the first team.
Wow.
Follow me, boys.
Oh, they're so
Well, and girls in there as well.
Well, they're all like, oh, I can't believe it. And so off they go. The first team there, they're trying their best. They're not having a great defence, they're Wolves.
Classic roll
there. And you know what? Have you seen they even got the celebration right as well?
Oh, gosh, you see it all on the school pitch as well. They do all the... You can tell which ones watch all the football at the weekends, because they're doing all the dramatic kind of, ref!
You know what? That's the worry, though.
It's
crazy.
crazy.
Get the good stuff. You get the celebrations, which are fantastic. The rolling around on the ground.
You do
all
that in the
history
newsroom.
of it.
I know, but I do that just purely for attention. You can't help. You can't help me with that.
No.
But Stefan Freund is going to join us in an hour. German international, and talking about De Kaiser.
Fabulous.
Franz Beckenbauer and how Germany's reacting.
OK, fabulous. Thank you, Paul.
Lovely stuff, Paul. Thank you. Now, surveys, our survey said, anyway, apparently they claim car headlights are too bright and can dazzle drivers. It's a glaring problem. Oh, there you go. Anyway, we'll talk about it more in Headline Makers.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back at 7:44. It is Headline Makers, and we're going through the papers and everything that's out there this morning with the former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and the GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Welcome back to both of you. Claire, can we start with Nigel Farage's prediction right here on GB News last night that actually we could have 10 years of Labour due to how badly he thinks that the Conservatives have ruled and led the country over the last decade?
It was a really interesting piece, and I think he's got a point. As much as it pains me to say it, I don't want to see the Conservatives out of power at all. But when you look at the way everything is going, when you look at the political turmoil that we've had for at least the last 4 years, you can see that it's almost as if the Conservatives are handing it over to Labour. And I think it's always handy to have these things pointed out in no uncertain
No, but I'll tell you what was interesting. I don't know what you both think about this, and we'll play the clip for you in a minute so you can make up your own mind. But Richard Tice last week gave a speech saying, well, if you need to vote for us, otherwise there'll be Starmageddon. Nigel's saying, who's the president of the party, saying, well, there's going to be Starmageddon whoever you vote for.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably right. That, I mean, at the moment, it's very hard to see how the Tories can possibly pull back from where they are at the moment. I mean, the polls aren't shifting, whatever Rishi Sunak does. And certainly what Keir Starmer says is that he's got a 10-year plan for the renewal of Britain, which means he needs 2 terms. And remember what happened with Tony Blair, that the Tories were in complete disarray just before the 1997 landslide. He got 3 terms. So you're not just talking about... We could be there, for another 15 years or something.
But there's an awful lot of difference between 1996, 97 and what's happening now. Yes, the Conservative Party was in disarray then, but also Labour were much better, much more organised, looking like a government in waiting, whereas we don't have that at the moment. You need to have an effective opposition if you want them to go into power, and currently we just don't have it. And I think that voters don't necessarily want to vote Conservative. They are really angry, but not enough to go and vote for Labour because it doesn't give them any hope that anything...
But in 5 years, they could grow into the job. Labour could grow into the job.
Well, yes, but, you know, Tony Blair, you got the feeling he was already ready to go, wasn't he, before he got into power? And perhaps that's why we're hearing now, for the first time ever, Sir Keir Starmer saying he wants to kind of emulate Tony Blair, who's, I guess, in many ways since been disgraced, hasn't he?
Oh, well, let's give you this clip then, shall we? So, Leader of Reform, Richard Tice, says, if you want to keep Labour out, vote for Reform. Nigel Farage, who's the honorary president of Reform UK, says this.
But I think Labour have got a decade in power almost written in already. Such is the level of disenchantment at the Conservatives and what they've done. Remember this, in 1974, the Conservative Party lost the election. You would have thought for all the world they were doomed after Ted Heath. But a new political philosophy and a new leader came along in Margaret Thatcher. They were only in opposition for one term. The silent majority in this country agree with many of the things, Mark, that you and I agree with. It's part of why GB News is doing as well as it is. I don't know whether the Conservatives are going to be replaced, whether they're going to be changed. What I do know is that Reform is going to play a very important role in realigning the centre-right of British politics to give us a proper choice.
Which is interesting because basically what he's saying is that Reform, you know, aren't going to win anything. Or, you know, they may win some seats. They're not going to make up a government.
They won't win any seats at the moment.
But they're not going to make up... they're certainly not going to make up a government, but they are going to effectively shape the Conservative Party.
That's exactly it. I mean, they will disrupt the Tory party. It may well be that at the general election, some Tory MPs will lose their seats because of Reform, but under the first-past-the-post system, Reform won't get a seat. It's the same that UKIP had the same problem, and they were higher in the poll.
And whereas it's a very odd thing for a president of a party to say, actually, it's the sort of honesty you don't get from anybody else. You've got to be straightforward about it.
You have, and I think that politics has moved now into such a space where people just want honest answers. And whether you agree with him or disagree, Nigel Farage is always one of those who will give quite a robust opinion. I think it's a little bit different for Richard Tice. He's more of that political angle. He wants to get people voted in. So it's sort of two sides of looking at it, but I think that any political party that says Reform isn't a threat is wrong. I do think they are. I think they are a grand disruptor, and it's really going to be up to the public if they can come out and vote or if they prefer their local candidate for whichever party is standing.
Not just Nigel Farage who's been saying things are worse under the Tories, but also a number of experts talking about water pollution, Nigel. And this is inside The Guardian. They're calling for an independent inquiry into the sewage that we find.
Yes, that's right. And this is the rather snappily titled Chartered Institution of Water and Environmental Management.
OK.
But basically, they police the sewage that
that's a job.
in our rivers. Anyway, what they're saying is that the Tories were meant to actually do all this back in 2010. And what they were meant to create was what are called sponge cities. And the idea of it doesn't sound very sort of edifying, but the idea of a sponge city is that you have plenty of plant cover, you have green zones, ponds, the pavements soak water away. That's the idea of it. And this whole thing was meant to come in 2011. It was then abandoned in 2015. And one of the reason we have so much sewage floating around is because of that. So what the Institute is calling for is an inquiry into this to see if we can actually get back and get those regulations back in place.
It never ceases to amaze me that the Environment Secretary is married to one of the bosses of a big water company in this country, and that isn't considered a conflict of interest, given, you know, how much criticism there is directed at these people, not least in terms of the dividends that they're all paying themselves.
Precisely, and I don't think we need an inquiry to work out that if water companies didn't distribute waste into our waterways, into seas, into ponds, into lakes, then we wouldn't have this problem. And it seems that Ofwat, the regulator, are really toothless on this because those companies know what they're doing, they get away with it, they might get a fine now and again, but realistically, there's no deterrent to them. They need to be dealt with a hell of a lot better, a lot stronger. And it's really going to be up to the public if they can come out and vote or if they prefer their local candidate for whichever party is standing.
But in 5 years, they could grow into the job. Labour could grow into the job.
Precisely. And I don't think we need an inquiry to work out that if water companies didn't distribute waste into our waterways, into seas, into ponds, into lakes, then we wouldn't have this problem. And it seems that Ofwat, the regulator, are really toothless on this because those companies know what they're doing, they get away with it, they might get a fine now and again, but realistically, there's no deterrent to them. They need to be dealt with a hell of a lot better, a lot stronger. in fact, take it out of their hands, give it to other water companies. There is no competition.
Nationalise it.
I'm not in favour.
Oh, yes, please.
No.
There we go.
Nationalise.
Right, before we run out of time, Nigel, let's have a look at the Express and car headlights.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's moaning about car headlights.
Well, I moan about them all the time, actually. I find them really difficult. But yes, this is a survey by the RAC, which is saying that 85% of people say it's got the car headlight dazzling has got worse over the last year.
Year?
And the issue is LED lights as opposed to the old halogen ones, and they're now actually dazzling motorists. And the dangerous part of this is that people are reporting that they can't see up to 6 seconds after being dazzled. And obviously that's hugely dangerous. And as a result of that, 1 in 14 drivers say won't drive at night. I don't like driving at night anymore. I get dazzled by the headlights coming towards me.
That's an... Oh, Lord.
So Claire drives, that's the easiest way of actually doing it.
I hate to say it, but the older you get, the less you like driving at night.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah, well, I think that's what I thought had a lot to do with it, but now I know it's the LED
It's
headlights.
somebody else's fault. The LED headlights have been around for years.
But they have those kind of xenon blue lights are very, very bright, and it's very nice if you're in a car and you're driving and you can see 12, 13 feet in front of you, but if you're going to blind the person that's oncoming, then...
We all need those special sunglasses that my grandpa used to have. Yeah. They pulled down, he'd have his normal glasses, and then when it got bad...
The yellow ones.
Oh, the yellow.
Yeah.
There you go.
They are great. They do work.
Lovely. We'll see you a little bit later on, you two.
Thank you
very much indeed. We've been talking about dog names all morning, so you've been sending yours in with some little pictures. And this is Jip. We wanted a one-syllable name, as my other half has Parkinson's, and it's easy for him to say.
Donna
haven't got a name from that, though. Who sent that in? Sorry about that.
That was. Donna's been in touch. So this is her dog, Milo. He's a Border Terrier, and this was on his 17th birthday.
Wow, done really well. And Claire in Cambridgeshire sent us Bailey. Other end of the spectrum, he's 3.5 months old. Beautiful.
Keep them coming in. We're loving it. In the meantime, here's Alex Deakin with your weather.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Pretty frosty out there again for most of us. A bit more cloud across the north and the east, making for a grey and breezy day here. Some places have avoided a frost thanks to that increase in cloud, which is also bringing a few light showers over southeast Scotland, northeast England, pretty scattered, fairly light and of rain rather than any snow. For the south, we've got a beautiful winter's day to look at, but it is cold and there's a brisk wind blowing here as well. That wind, wherever you've got it, across the south or the northeast, really bringing a chill. Lighter winds to western Scotland, some good spells of sunshine on the west coast here. Through this evening, pretty quickly, where we've got the clear skies, the frost comes back. The cloud, though, sticking around over northern England. We'll see a bit more of it spreading to North Wales, northwest England, times through Northern Ireland and across central and southern Scotland. And again, with more cloud overnight, that should help to prevent a frost. But a frosty night across the Highlands and again in the south. -1, -2, even in towns and cities. Rural spots a little lower than that. So again, a chilly day on Thursday, quite a cloudy one over parts of the Midlands, Wales, northern England and southern and eastern Scotland. Again, the sunniest skies, probably the west coast of Scotland, southernmost parts of England and Wales. But for most, it's a dry day. That breeze bringing a chill along the east coast and along the south coast, and temperatures mostly around or touch below average at 6 or 7 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
A very good morning to you. It is just turning 8 o'clock on Wednesday, the 10th of January. You are tuned into Breakfast with Stephen and Isabel.
Well, this is what we've got for you this morning, and breaking news overnight, 30 Tory MPs are set to back amendments that toughen up the Prime Minister's Rwanda policy, with some politicians claiming the stakes could not be higher.
The technical expert who built the faulty Horizon IT system and gave evidence used to convict hundreds of postmasters has demanded immunity before he agreed to appear at a public inquiry.
Hand over the cash. Disgraced former post office boss Paula Venables is facing calls to return bonuses worth millions of pounds after already handing back her CBE following a huge public outcry.
Yes, we have more questions for Paula Venables, people saying she should be handing back her bonuses as well. Lots of criticism of Fujitsu, the makers of this faulty software. Meanwhile, in Parliament, we are expecting an update from the government today with what they plan to do in terms of quashing these hundreds of wrongful convictions.
As much of Britain remains on amber alert for freezing temperatures.
I'm Jack Carson in Tewkesbury this morning, where stubborn floodwater refuses to recede and that amber alert stays in place. I'll have the latest.
Well, of course, we'll have full forecasts for wherever you are in the UK from Alex Deakin.
There's a bit more cloud around today, particularly in the northeast, with 1 or 2 scattered showers. Sunny for some, cold for all. Join me later for a full forecast.
And Paul Coit will be joining us with all the sports updates for you.
Alex looks like he was in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, doesn't he? With the big grass in the background there. Sorry, amuse me. Carabao Cup semi-final, first leg, Middlesbrough beat Chelsea, a tepid Chelsea, and also we'll be heading to Germany to see how they react to the death of the Kaiser. Franz Beckenbauer with German legend Stefan Freund is going to be with us live.
It was a serious story.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry.
See you later, if you're good. After 8:30, we're talking about the big stories making headlines today with Nigel Nelson and Claire Pearsall.
And don't forget, you can join in all of our discussions. Do get in touch. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.com. We're waiting for your emails.
Oh.
There's our guest flying into the set there for us.
There you go. It's very, very professional. On dogs, we'll be talking dog names because there's a list of the top 10 dog names out for 2023. Luna, number 1. Teddy, Milo, Lola, Coco, Daisy, Poppy, Buddy, Bailey and Willow. Jeff says, I'm sure, Stephen, there are lots of viewers who would like to hear about your progress with the dog. Where are the pics and videos? Yeah, do you know what? I don't really take many.
What?
Pics and videos.
My entire phone is a roll of my little kitten, who's 6 months old now.
Don't really take it, but he's doing very well. We've started training now.
Oh, right. Can he roll?
No, it's not.
Can he do paw?
It's obedience training.
Oh, just sit, stop.
No, he can do all of that already. Please.
See, I'm not a dog mum. I don't know how it works.
It's all about, getting him to, obey commands when you're out and about and all that sort of thing now. So we've started that.
It's hard, isn't it? Puppy training, disciplining.
Yeah. But it is hard.
It's a big commitment.
But it's got to be done.
Yeah.
It's got to be done. This one I like from Brian, who says, my son's dog is called Hadley. The amazing thing is that I thought of the name and his son accepted it. I quite like Hadley. I don't know why. It's an unusual thing for him to agree with me. Oh, dear, Brian. Hadley is an English setter.
This one's from David. I want to make sure I pronounce this right. Stourport on 7. Forgive me if I've got that wrong. He says, we've always had Rottweilers and we've always given them really friendly names. Our last one was called Rodney. And our newest one, who's now 18 months old, is called Ralph. Oh, we find that softer names help people be less scared of big dogs. Yeah. Well, that's not your approach, is it? Rex.
Yeah. I quite like Rodney for a dog.
Rodney's brilliant.
My nephew's called Ralph, and actually we do end up calling the dog Ralph and Ralph Rex.
Oh, OK.
On the video calls and things. It's just like, one of those things. So keep your thoughts coming through on that. It's nice to have a little something to smile about this morning.
Indeed. Not so much to smile about for the Prime Minister. He's set to face yet another showdown over his flagship Rwanda scheme, as dozens of Tory rebels are now threatening to vote against the policy.
Yeah, more than 30 Conservative MPs, and actually that would be enough to stop this all going through, so it's an important figure. But they're backing amendments to prevent European judges and human rights lawyers from blocking deportation flights.
Well, leading the rebels is the former Immigration Minister and ally of the Prime Minister, Robert Jenrick. He was Immigration Minister before he quit recently, saying the stakes could not be higher for Britain.
So the bill goes back to the Commons next week. So how much of a problem is this going to be for Rishi Sunak?
Yes, well, with the Prime Minister's questions taking place today, the first of a general election year, it is likely to be something of a showdown. Let's get the analysis of former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. He's in a very difficult spot here, the Prime Minister, but as Stephen says, is 30 potentially the magic number that could derail his flagship policy?
I think it is, and so it's very important, therefore, between now and next week, when the bill actually comes back for its third reading, that Number 10 does all that it can to appease those voters, those MPs, I should say, who are keen to back the amendments to make the legislation even tougher. That would obviously be something that's uncomfortable with the other half of the Conservative Party, the One Nation group that we keep hearing about, who think that the proposals go far enough as it is. So it's a very, very difficult balancing act for the Prime Minister to juggle at the minute, and we'll just have to see what happens between now and next week.
Hang on in there, Charlie, because we're just going to see if we can talk to one of those 30 Tory rebels, Danny Kruger, and see if we've got that line up and running. The issues with tech. Morning to you, Danny. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
You're causing a real headache for the PM, aren't you?
Well, that's not the intention. This is the parliamentary process. I mean, the first thing to say is the bill is actually a very good one, and we really welcome the steps the government's taken. the legislation that was in place before sadly wasn't strong enough to withstand the assaults on it from the legal profession. And this bill is a lot better. We're disapplying much of the European human rights framework that meant that the flights to Rwanda haven't taken off so far, and speeding up the process. So it is a very good bill, and there's now this treaty in place with Rwanda, which should set people's mind at rest as well. So that's the first thing. But yes, we do think there needs to be some tightening, and the government has said that it's prepared to listen to suggestions for that. So last night, a group of us tabled some amendments that we think will add to the protections that the policy needs to ensure that parts of the Human Rights Act, which would currently allow the courts to stop the policy, should be disapplied in our view. And we want to restrict further the opportunity for vexatious lawyers to make spurious claims on behalf of illegal migrants before they can be removed. We do have to have absolute protections for human rights. Please understand that. And our legal system does allow that. The problem is there are too many loopholes in the current law, which have meant that we can't defend our borders by insisting that anybody who arrives here illegally is swiftly detained and removed.
My question, if you are successful in beefing up this legislation with these amendments, do you genuinely think you will be any closer to seeing planes to Rwanda take off? Because presumably these changes will just simply be voted down in the Lords.
Well, the Lords is going to be a battle. I mean, I really recognise, and as Charlie Rowley was just saying, there is a tough balancing act for the government here to get along. But our view is ultimately the Commons is paramount. If the government really wants to push this through, it can. I think the Lords should recognise if the clearly expressed will of the Commons wants to push this bill through, that they should concede. Ultimately, the public absolutely insist, and they're right to do so, that the government controls the borders of this country, that we as a nation can determine who arrives here. It is very wrong that we have a legal framework which allows people to arrive on our shores and to live here for life, which I'm afraid the current system does. So yes, there's some tough times ahead, I think, in Parliament, because we're going to have to push very hard to get this through the Lords if our amendments are accepted. That's the first battle, by the way. We've got the committee stage in the Commons next week, and our hope is that the government, which has been engaging constructively with us in this process, will accept the force of the arguments that we're making, which, by the way, are completely consistent with the bill as it currently stands. They're already disapplying parts of the Human Rights Act. They're already toughening up the current law quite significantly. We think we need to go just a little bit further on a couple of key points, and I hope the government will recognise the value of that.
Are you just wasting your time, Mr. Kruger, if you're pushing so hard, you get all this through, it all happens, and then there's a Labour government, and it all just gets cancelled out again? Because, I mean, you're on record as saying the Conservatives are going to be obliterated at the next election.
Well, we're going to be obliterated unless we convince the public we're governing with their interests and their values in mind, and that's why this bill matters so much. The public is overwhelmingly with us and not with Labour on this policy area, and this policy area is absolutely top priority for many of our target voters. So politically, it's really important that we get this right. I do fear for our fortunes at the election unless we convincingly demonstrate that we will stop the votes, doing whatever it takes, which is what the PM himself has said. So we're very supportive of his agenda and his mission there. And I think we can still hold on to power at the election if we show that we're on the side of the people, because Labour really clearly aren't, particularly on migration, where their policy is absolutely not existent.
But you are demonstrating the problem, I suppose, there in many ways, because it's the One Nation Tories who've come out and said actually compromise is in the national interest. Otherwise, you, the party of Conservatives, all disagreeing on this, are actually playing into the hands of Labour and handing them the keys to number 10.
Well, a divided party is not a good look. I fully recognise that. It is really important that we combine and come together as a party, but we need to come together in a place that the public supports, and a process of conversation, civil dialogue, which is what's going on, parliamentary debate, that's all very appropriate and acceptable in my view. But yes, fundamentally, we will need to compromise. We have compromised. I mean, most of us would like to leave the ECHR altogether. We recognise that isn't where the government is. It's not where the majority of Parliament is. So that's, as far as we're concerned, something we need to concede and fight another day. We're working constructively on the detail of this bill to improve the way it will work, and I hope that our colleagues on the One Nation wing of the party will recognise that and work constructively to get to a bill that we can all support.
OK, Danny Kruger, appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed. Let's just get a final thought from Charlie Rowley, who's here in the studio. I mean, the issue here, and it's very much what the PM has done, he's sort of pinned all his flags to the Rwanda policy, and Mr Kruger there sort of implying, well, this is how we can win the election. Is it? I mean, is this policy getting it to work, the silver bullet the Tories need?
Well, Danny's absolutely right. I mean, it does matter to many, many people across the country, particularly those in the red wall seats, particularly people that voted for Brexit. Those are the people that voted Conservative, actually, in those areas for the first time in 2019. They voted for Brexit to take back control of their money, borders and laws. And this comes under, obviously, the borders bracket. But it's just making sure that you get the balance right between having as tough legislation as possible to get Rwanda off the ground, whilst upholding international obligations in order to ensure that the scheme actually can continue. And balancing that act between both sides of the Conservative Party.
Well, it's an almighty challenge for the Prime Minister to try and get this through. We appreciate your thoughts and all of that. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, the fallout from the post office scandal continues this morning.
Yes, the tech expert who actually built the faulty Horizon IT system has reportedly demanded immunity before appearing at a public inquiry.
He's Gareth Jenkins. He gave evidence saying the Fujitsu system was not corrupt, and that evidence did help to wrongfully convict more than 700 postmasters.
Well, meanwhile, the shamed former Post Office boss, Paula Venables, has bowed to huge public pressure to give up her CBE and is now facing calls to return millions of pounds that she was awarded in bonuses.
And let's talk to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who's in Westminster. I mean, this is an issue which is not only not going away, the government's going to have to come up with a pretty swift solution to this for justice for those 700 and odd who still haven't had their convictions quashed.
Indeed, and we know with previous miscarriages of justice and failures of the state that these things
there was a seat there
to take a long time. So we're expecting an update from the government today, and we'll be hearing from Kevin Hollinrake, the Post Office Minister, just a little bit later this morning. Obviously, it's something that the Prime Minister is going to address in Prime Minister's Questions too. And there is also at 1:30 this afternoon a meeting of the Horizon Compensation Advisory Board. So things are happening. It sounds like the current plan is to find a way to quash all these outstanding convictions of sub-postmasters. And a way to do that will probably involve bringing legislation before Parliament. Now, there are some concerns about that. Of course, the government should not be telling the judiciary what to do. So it is difficult. Also, some concerns that a tiny number of people may have actually taken money where they shouldn't, although they think those numbers are very, very low. So some concerns, some difficulties, but the government is very keen to get this sorted. So expect movement and also a speeding up of compensation. So we should know more later today.
OK, Catherine, thanks very much indeed. Lots of questions about who exactly should foot the bill for any compensation claims. Fujitsu, lots of people pointing the fingers at. Well, this morning they've said the current Post Office Horizon IT statutory inquiry is examining complex events stretching back over 20 years. Fujitsu apologises for its role in their suffering.
Yeah, an apology isn't going to wing it on this one. So where do you point the finger, though, in the sense that it was the Fujitsu software that wasn't working correctly? But this is a post office issue, so does the buck stop with the post office or with
which means
IT
the taxpayer
company?
at the end of the day, potentially.
Well, it does, but do you know what? As a taxpayer, you just have to say, you've just got to swallow it, because these people have had their lives destroyed and they should be getting a lot of compensation.
Oh, there's no question they should be getting compensation, but should Fujitsu continue to be getting these lucrative contracts? I mean, the FT, the front of the paper this morning, they won contracts under Sunak's watch, despite the post office scandal, to the tune of billions of pounds. Let us know what you think in all of this.
They should certainly make a contribution, put it that way. Your views on that would be welcome. Now, the bitterly cold start to the week saw snow across the UK, temperatures falling to -9 in some places. So what do you need in all of this if it's going to get worse or not? You need grit out there, and gritting teams across the country have been called into action.
Yes, and our national reporter, Theo Jacumba, has joined an army of gritters out and about for us this morning in Aylesbury.
As temperatures plummet and flurries of snow blanket Britain, most of us escape to their warm indoors, but spare a thought for those who are enduring freezing conditions to keep us safe. Gritting teams like this one in Aylesbury play an essential role in preventing road accidents. By scattering rock salt all over the country, they prevent the formation of slippery surfaces, which could have deadly consequences for motorists. As Britain braces for more snow showers, you may have seen gritters like this one on a road or motorway near you. And this comes as the UK Security Agency have issued an amber weather warning until midday on Friday. If this cold snap has got you losing your cool, there is some welcome news, with the Met Office predicting a return to average temperatures later this week. But with yet more snow forecast, Buckinghamshire Councillor Steve Broadband says they are ready for anything.
So we're really well prepared. We start our winter service back in October. We fill the salt barns, so they're ready to go. We've done about 13 or 14 runs since October, but looking at the week ahead, you're right, the snow is coming and the temperatures have dropped. So we have 25 crews who are ready to go out on our gritting lorries and make sure we grit our primary network.
Forecasters say a brutal Baltic weather front is expected over the coming days as the cold snap continues, testing the true grit of Aylesbury's dedicated team. Theo Jacumba, GB News.
Let's talk to our correspondent Jack Carson, who's in Tewkesbury for us this morning. Well, I mean, it might not be snow there in Tewkesbury, Jack, but they're still struggling with the flooding, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. If I just step out the way a little bit, you can just see some of the floodwater, some of the really stubborn floodwater that still remains here in Tewkesbury. Now, when, of course, we had that serious flooding last week, Tewkesbury very much became an island. Now, much of the water has been able to recede, but there is still quite a bit of stubborn water. And what we're finding with that mix of that stubborn floodwater and then this cold snap that we've got this week with that amber alert from the UK Health Security Agency is that just there's a very thin layer of ice over the top of this flood water. I'd love to get a little bit closer, but the path is so slippy because of that thin layer of water that's been over the pavements, because of that flood water not being able to receive. It is extremely slippy with the ice, and the likes of the gritters that you saw there that Theo had spent the morning with, and lots of those can't get to some of the areas, some of the roads here in Tewkesbury because of that flood water remaining. Of course, it's the confluence of the River Avon and the River Severn which really put this town under water, and there is still a flood alert in place for parts of Tewkesbury this morning. So still a warning, and we know residents were evacuated, and that clean-up is still being quite slow because of this cold weather as well. Now, of course, that cold weather is set to continue. It could even still get worse. There's set to be a risk of an unsettled weather pushing southwards. Now, joining that cold air that we know is also coming from the north, that could cause, they reckon, up to 5 centimetres of snow here in the south. So that clean-up making itself even harder here.
Jack, thanks very much indeed.
Well, with all eyes on the forecast, let's get an update from Alex Deakin at the Met Office.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Pretty frosty out there again for most of us. A bit more cloud across the north and the east, making for a grey and breezy day here. Some places have avoided a frost thanks to that increasing cloud, which is also bringing a few light showers over southeast Scotland, northeast England, pretty scattered, fairly light and of rain rather than any snow. For the south, we've got a beautiful winter's day to look at, but it is cold and there's a brisk wind blowing here as as well. That wind, wherever you've got it, across the south or the northeast, really bringing a chill. Lighter winds to western Scotland, some good spells of sunshine on the west coast here. Through this evening, pretty quickly, where we've got the clear skies, the frost comes back. The cloud, though, sticking around over northern England. We'll see a bit more of it spreading to North Wales, northwest England, times through Northern Ireland and across central and southern Scotland. And again, with more cloud overnight, that should help to prevent a frost. But a frosty night across the Highlands and again in the south, -1, -2, even in towns and cities. Rural spots a little lower than that. So again, a chilly day on Thursday, quite a cloudy one over parts of the Midlands, Wales, northern England and southern and eastern Scotland. Again, the sunniest skies, probably the west coast of Scotland, southernmost parts of England and Wales. But for most, it's a dry day. That breeze bringing a chill along the east coast and along the south coast, and temperatures mostly around or touch below average at 6 or 7 Celsius.
Alex, thank you. Now, still to come, we're going to be asking why more and more puppies are still being smuggled and what can we do about it? Looking into it next here on GB News.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, we're talking about puppy smuggling this morning. Despite a surge in it, animal welfare charities are complaining the government has done little to tackle the issue.
Yeah, smuggling puppies and indeed kittens into the UK has become a lucrative business ever since demand for pets surged during the pandemic. Now, the animals often suffer in terrible conditions in transit to be sold then at competitive prices.
Well, Jeff Moody's been finding out how widespread the issue is and why this is a personal crusade for one MP.
The RSPCA says it's delighted. Legislation to tackle pet theft, puppy, kitten and ferret smuggling, as well as the import of dogs with cropped ears, had been kicked into the long grass. But it's back, thanks to North Devon MP Selene Saxby.
Puppy smuggling was something that became a huge issue during the pandemic, and it hit my inbox regularly. It's been a campaign that's been run by the Dogs Trust, the RSPCA and others right the way through, and anyone looking back on my social media will see I've been supportive of it the whole way through. I know it's popular, and it's popular almost with everybody. It's not a bill that I think will be contentious.
It's a private member's bill. MPs can add their names to a ballot, and the successful bids get to present new legislation before the House. Government's Kept Animals Bill had been scrapped, but thanks to Selene Saxby and her private members' bill, at least part of the legislation has a chance to become law, something Becky Bristow from the Dogs Trust thinks is needed.
There has literally never been a more important time for the enforcement of animal welfare. For us, obviously, that's in relation to dogs. More and more dogs are being purchased. They're being purchased online. And just no traceability, because people understand. They understand that they need to be able to protect the breeding females and know where their puppies are coming from.
Importing puppies into the UK is a lucrative business. Smugglers can sell their puppies much cheaper online and often take the dogs from their mothers too young. They're not vaccinated and can come across to the UK in appalling conditions. All sorts of health issues can affect them. More than 66,000 dogs were commercially imported to the UK last year, according to Animal and Plant Health Agency figures. Border authorities say they've seen a 260% increase in the number of young puppies being intercepted at customs. 69% of UK adults say more needs to be done to stop the practice. Selene Saxby's right, it's popular.
It's a huge privilege, and I am very, very grateful to have come high in the ballot. I'm not normally lucky in ballots, so it is a huge opportunity, and it's a remarkable thing when I talk to colleagues who've had the opportunity to have legislation laid in their name. It is something I'm very much looking forward to, and I very much hope that we can get it over the line before we get to an election.
The bill is due to be read at the beginning of next month. After that, it will wend its way through the Lords before possibly becoming law. And with a general election looking unlikely before the autumn, the hope is it won't be long before the practice is stamped out forever. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Do you know what the pressure's on us? If you're buying a kitten or a puppy, make sure you know where you're buying it from.
Absolutely.
Where it's come from.
Mm-hmm.
Then it kills the trade.
Do your
that sort of
homework,
stuff.
absolutely.
Yeah, really, you've got to. Should we have a look at the sport? Because Paul Coyte is, again, poised.
I am
to
poised.
go. But we're going to reflect back, and we talked about De Keyser yesterday. But I mean, it's still, the world of football and actually beyond are still feeling that loss of someone who had such an influence on the game.
Well, when we look at deaths, and also with footballers as well, we're now getting to that era or that time where we've got household names that have obviously passing. We lost Bobby Charlton recently, and had a great friendship and played against Franz Beckenbauer back in '66, and so that's within 3 months. Pelé was a year ago, so a lot of the real greats that are disappearing, unfortunately. Franz Beckenbauer, De Keyser, World Cup winning captain, World Cup winning manager. So it'd be interesting to see how it's actually felt over in Germany. I do have someone that can speak to us now. This is a former German international legend and also German TV pundit these days as well, Stefan Freund. He's in Germany. Morning, Stefan.
Good morning, Paul. Great to listen to you, and fantastic explanation already.
Oh, bless you. So we're all done. Thank you very much. It's always good to see you, Stefan. Seriously, though, with Franz Beckenbauer, what's the reaction been like in Germany? Because it's been pretty big here, but I imagine huge over there.
Exactly. Outstanding reaction. Of course, we are all disappointed. We are all shocked still, because the biggest footballer ever, maybe the biggest coach, maybe the biggest person in Germany ever, died. And today, I think 4 pages in the biggest newspaper, Bild, and all the reactions are, of course, disappointing. And what a fantastic person he was. I met him when he tried to sign me for Bayern Munich in 1996 before the European Championship in England. And when he came into the room, everything was different. His aura been unbelievable. And of course, we all miss him already.
I can imagine if you're saying that he tried to sign you back in '96, even though you're a well-known player at that time, did you feel that, though? Was there a certain nerves? Because, you know, you were with the Kaiser, weren't you?
Exactly. Good point. When I moved into the house from Uli Hoeneß and Franz Beckenbauer was there, 1996, I couldn't breathe, because when the Kaiser is in front of you, you're for a moment shocked. But then comes the real moment that he's so cool. He's a gentleman. He said, "Hello, Steffen, you okay? You ready to sign for Bayern?" And then you're shocked for a moment, and then you start to talk. And he was always behind the players as a coach later, as a person. And yeah, nobody is bigger in Germany. And don't forget, I'm an East German. So I watched, before the wall fell down, all the games for the BRD or for West Germany when they won the World Cup 1990. The wall was falling down, but I was still in Brandenburg in East Germany. Whole East Germany watched the final. We all love to win the World Cup, and of course, as a player and as a coach, to win the World Cup, Paul, nothing is bigger.
Well, we sort of moved slightly from football, slightly a little more political with this, because, as you say, growing up in East Germany, I know you were a very small child probably when Germany won the World Cup in '74, but in '90, obviously with the wall coming down, etc. What was it like? Did East Germans support West Germany at that time?
Of course, we came together at that time and being happy. Everything changed overnight. So before '89, I watched Franz Beckenbauer on TV and I said, I will never met that person. What a hero. And later I'm in front of him in 1990, winning the World Cup final against Italy. I think East Germany been crazy at that time. And we all love football. We all came together. And Franz, I think, was the biggest hero and the biggest person to bring everyone together. If you say, yes, we will win now everything, then we will win everything. And everything what Franz did was successful.
Well, finally, the slight controversy, though, I mean, was his reputation tarnished in any way in Germany with the allegations that came out later around FIFA and World Cups, or has that not been spoken about really over there, Steffen?
Of course, they spoke about that still, and yesterday and the last 2 days was still part of the media. But I think it's a good moment now to say it doesn't matter. Franz Beckenbauer, he was the person to bring the World Cup over to Germany, and nobody else. And he traveled all over the world to bring the World Cup to Germany, and he did. And I'm sure, Paul, you remember 2006 in Germany. Fantastic summer, fantastic organized from the DFB, from everyone in Germany. And Franz was the organizer, the boss of everything, and that's why everything was so positive. And still everyone is talking about the World Cup 2006 in a positive way. And there's a little bit more, don't take me wrong, down to the media to remember maybe there was something wrong.
Sure. I mean, it was a great World Cup, apart from the Frank Lampard shot that went over the line, but we won't mention that one whatsoever. Steffen, a great legend yourself as well. We really appreciate your time, and thanks for coming on and remembering the great Franz Beckenbauer.
Pleasure, Paul, and goodbye to everyone.
Thank you, sir.
What a nice
What
fella.
a charmer.
Fantastic.
What an absolute charmer.
Yeah. Honestly, it's the really big stars like that who are often the most humble.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Steffen said, Franz Beckenbauer tried to sign him for Bayern Munich. Never got to the bottom of, actually, I think it was probably Steffen that said, you know what? I think Tottenham Hotspur is going to be the place for me. So that was maybe the route he took, but I did leave that at the time. But it's great to have him.
Paul, thanks very much indeed. Still to come, South Korea's parliament has done something.
They've decided to outlaw the cruel sale of Please help us out.
I don't know.
Oh, dog meat.
There you go. I should have brought that up on my computer. That would have saved that embarrassment. There you go. Anyway, it's a serious story. We'll tell you more in a moment.
It's good news, though.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Oh, 8:40. Good morning to you. Let's go through some of the headlines this morning with our senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson, and former Home Office Special Advisor, Claire Pearson, or Mrs Nelson. Do you ever go by Mrs Nelson?
I do, in my private life, my passport and things like You've that. just outed them. Else.
Outed them? What, as a married couple?
No, I know.
I think people know that already.
Two different sides of the political spectrum, but
Under one
same
house.
maritable bed.
Yeah, very
Lovely.
Nice. That's
quite right.
Nice of the bed. Claire, The Mirror, skipping school.
Yeah, now this is quite interesting, and on the surface you can think, well, what's not to like about this idea? The level of absenteeism in children is increasing and has done since the pandemic, and we need to get kids back into school and accepting that it's not an option. You have to be there. But then when you dig a little bit deeper, Unfortunately, the Labour Party seem to want to use AI to link up all records of children. I don't know if this is going to delve into parents' social media. I have a suspicion that it might.
But this is partly down to homeschooling, though, as well, isn't it?
Some of it is. Some of it is. And the homeschooling communities are very, very angry because they feel that it is their choice to home educate their child, as it is, and they do a good job of it, and they are regulated enough, and they don't need to be bought into it. I think
But Labour won't stop them homeschooling, will they? I mean, the whole point of it is just to register to make sure the child who is missing from school is being homeschooled.
But they already have that. The local authorities know who is off-roll and who is being home educated. I think what everybody misses is some of the reasons that kids aren't at school could be down to special educational needs not being met. There are an awful lot of children out of school because there isn't a suitable placement for them. And there are also a lot of people who just take the view that ever since COVID, school is an option, and you know what, if there are strikes going on, then the teachers can make you work from home and educate your child at the same time. That leads me to my next point. Andrew Pearce was making the point yesterday that it's all very well for Bridget Phillipson to come out with all these plans, but actually it was the Labour Party who, during COVID, actually fought to try and keep the schools closed, and the unions as well, very much not wanting kids back in classrooms, and they have a lot of questions to answer about the levels of absenteeism that we're dealing with today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously that COVID plays a certain part in this. I mean, I think that the keeping schools closed bit was obviously one of the most controversial aspects of the whole pandemic, and the one thing that the current public inquiry needs to look into to decide what to do in the future. The argument at the time was that even if the kids weren't going to get terribly ill, they'd bring it home to vulnerable parents or to grandparents. So it kind of felt that the measure was necessary. The question is, should it have gone on for quite so long?
Yeah, no. OK, talking of things COVID-related, Nigel, this is in various papers, including the Express and the Star, about wearing masks in Spain. And I know from people living out there that already it's in force already.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
You go to the doctors, you go to the pharmacist,
or a hospital, or a clinic, or whatever.
You've got to wear a mask.
Yeah. And there is actually an A&E doctor over here who's suggesting that we should be wearing them in crowded places. I still have my mask. No, I do. I haven't actually used a mask since COVID, but I do have one in my case all the time.
You see, I wore a mask. I did what I was told, but I'm unclear now on the evidence that seems to be coming out now, where a lot of people are still saying actually it didn't actually make any difference.
Well, it didn't. If you wore the surgical mask, they made no difference at all. These ones are the industrial masks, the FFP2s. It was actually Rachel Reeves who got me to wear one of these, because she said that they go right round your face, they keep particles out. And bear in mind, it was an airborne disease. So on the basis of that, if the virus is flying around in the air, those ordinary surgical masks are completely useless.
We actually just had an email from our GP surgery this week saying, given this huge spike they're seeing in flu and COVID at the moment, that all patients coming into the waiting room for face-to-face appointments have to wear mandatory masks.
Oh, so it is coming back. Well, I mean, yeah, I didn't know we'd started it here. But I mean, we were both ill over the Christmas period, and whether it's actually we didn't test ourselves to see if it was COVID, but now more and more people are coming to work. The trains are getting progressively more crowded again. The buses, the tubes. Suddenly, you're actually mixing with people an awful lot, and viruses are being spread around.
But it almost feels like we're turning into China. We've seen them do this every winter, really. Everyone in China sticks a mask on, and you actually see a lot of Chinese people doing that here in the UK out of habit.
Are
we going to do that every? Oh, that's that as well, isn't it?
Yeah. All the time over there.
But you know, maybe that's the way we're going.
Yeah, I don't know.
I hope not. I hope not. And I think that the evidence really isn't there to say that it makes a massive difference. Now, I did wear a mask when we were told to, and I obeyed those rules. But I sort of look at it now and I think,
is this going to make a massive difference to all of the coughs, colds, sniffles, flus that are around naturally? And we dealt with it all prior to COVID. Can we not deal with it afterwards? And I think sensible things about not going into the office when you're really infectious is a really sensible option.
Or staying away from loved ones if they're vulnerable.
I do think if they tried over here to bring in mask-wearing measures again,
it would.
Well, Claire's view is you wouldn't wear a mask again, would you?
No, I don't think I would. And I think there are an awful lot of people who've been led down this garden path and just say, do you know what? No.
It plays into the schools discussion as well, doesn't it?
Certainly does.
There are questions about whether we will ever follow these kinds of
which is what the inquiry is about.
Well, according to Martin Bagott in the Mirror this morning, meat eaters are more likely to get COVID.
Ooh.
This is...
that's me done.
That's a survey of something. Vegetarians less likely. This is a 5-month study.
That's Claire.
Yes. Oh, right. Yeah. Well, you're fine, all right.
Of the number of people in this survey who caught COVID, 52% were meat eaters, 40% were on a plant-based diet.
Well, you'll both be full of T cells anyway now. If you've both had COVID over Christmas, you'll be fine.
Well, if it was COVID.
If it was COVID, you wiped out, weren't you?
Yeah,
we
just
nice.
But we didn't test. The previous time we were ill, we actually tested and it was fine. But this time we didn't bother.
No, I was ill. I didn't test.
Same. I was wiped out, but I didn't test.
All four of us could have had COVID then.
Yeah.
Right, let's talk about Stephen Fry, Claire. He's waded into the discussion about whether or not we should be wearing bear fur. And I say we, I'm talking about ceremonial dress for our servicemen and women.
Yeah, these are the bear skins, which one of the iconic pictures when everybody thinks of what the United Kingdom is like. It's soldiers in red uniforms with a bear skin. Now, this is not the first time that this subject has come up. I've been in the House of Commons for now coming up to 20 years. And at least the last 15, there has been a campaign somewhere along the line of people saying, ditch bear fur. The argument against using faux fur for the hats is that it isn't as solid as fur, and if it rains, then they tend to collapse in and it doesn't keep its shape and they go all sort of straggly and all the rest.
Have they heard of starch? A bit of starch and faux fur. I'm not sure I buy it.
I think
mean,
it's something when it's really
it's all licensed.
Yeah, but they actually do.
The
they collapse like a sponge.
Yeah.
And what's been happening is that I've written story after story about this because it keeps coming up. But PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, they have a laboratory where they're trying to actually design.
Oh, really?
Design a busby that the army can use. And what
I had one in the studio about a year ago. 18 months
Did you pour water on it?
No, I didn't pour water on it because they brought it in. I didn't know. But it was just the internal structure is all right. I mean, it was heavy as anything.
They are really heavy, and I think the argument for keeping on using fur is that the outlay of it, I mean, they're about sort of £650 per hat, if you want, for a better phrase, but they last for about 80 years. If you have faux fur, they're not going to last as long. It's not going to be so friendly.
But the MOD do
say... It's a big debate then. You know, do the Lords wear ermine or ermine? Or
yeah, they do. They still, yeah.
So is that ethical?
But the MOD say that they will go for faux fur if somebody can come up with a decent one. Yeah.
Well, that's got to be doable. There's no need to be.
I agree. I have to say.
Why? Nigel, dog meat, which has been. It's one of those. It's almost like this a mythical stuff here about people eating dog meat. You think, ooh.
Yeah,
but it actually has been legal in South Korea.
Yes, it has. I mean, in South Korea, they do it. I don't know as we've been doing sort of dog names all day, that I don't know whether what South Korean dogs are mostly called.
Very good.
But anyway, this is what they end up at, is that apparently it's going down, that more younger South Koreans are keeping dogs as pets, so they tend not to want to eat them, so there's fewer of them. But there are still 1,100 farms that are breeding dogs purely for meat. 1,600 restaurants in South Korea sell it, so obviously there's a market for it. And what the South Korean Parliament has done is passed a law saying, right, we're going to outlaw this. We're not outlawing the eating of dogs, but the breeding of dogs for human meat.
Yeah.
And they're giving firms a few years to actually adjust to the new system.
I mean, it's just so repulsive, isn't it, to our sensibilities? It's just offensive, frankly.
It is, and I think the attitude in South Korea is changing as more and more people are becoming dog owners.
But I think the older generation are very traditional when it comes to
but this isn't coming in until 2027. It's not an imminent thing, and I think it should be a lot quicker than that.
No,
I don't
I mean, look,
the farming.
I don't like the idea of it one tiny little bit. And plus, I've been a really strict vegetarian for 45 years, so I'm not sort of new to this game. However, you know, we used to eat a lot of rabbit in this country. We don't now. We used to. Of course, they are rabbits.
Oh, I suppose they are. But we don't eat pet rabbits.
We used to eat a lot of horse meat, which we don't anymore. Well, the French. So these. I mean, whereas I hate the idea of people eating a dog in another culture. If it's more acceptable.
Well, I mean, certainly when you mention horse meat in Europe, it's still being eaten.
Still big,
yeah. And I've only ever had it by accident. I wouldn't have chosen it, but it tasted fine. Sorry, Claire, but Claire's got a horse, so she doesn't like me talking about horses being cut up.
But that's the problem, is that they do that in Europe, and there was a big scandal in the United Kingdom where they found horse meat.
I stood outside an abattoir for days in West Wales where they'd been actually using horse
and a lot
meat.
of people hadn't noticed, and a lot of people who were eating particular products were saying, well, they were very tasty. And I think it's that animal-loving nature of us that just finds it absolutely repulsive. But on the continent, they don't perhaps have the same emotional attachment, and they've always eaten the meat. And I think it's how it is procured. I think it's the cruelty.
Well, it's very cruel,
It's sort of, especially with those dog breeding farms in Korea, it's pretty awful.
I mean, but it's one of those things, you know, people eat meat and they don't really think about where it comes from.
That's the other thing. Yeah. They don't understand that the animal in the field ends up as the burger on their plate.
There needs to be strong welfare for any meat eaters. You should never eat anything that doesn't have good welfare.
I mean, don't be getting in touch. Don't be emailing. I'm not advocating eating dogs. I'm just saying it's, you know. Maybe there is a different moral compass with different countries.
Well, good news anyway, at least, that it is beginning to change. I'm going to say goodbye to you both, Nigel and Claire. Thank you for going through. But we are going to stick with the doggy theme. We've been talking doggy names, haven't we, all morning? And you've been sending in lots of pictures, lots of names for us. Luna is top of the pops at the moment when it comes to popularity.
Lola is number 4, because David sent us a picture of Lola, the golden retriever, and Louis, the black Labrador pup.
Debbie has sent in her picture, a lovely one of Reuben. Oh, look, dressed as that Union Jack jacket. Very fitting for GB News viewer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Reuben's not there. So we've got Luna, Teddy, Milo, Lola, Coco, Daisy, Poppy, Buddy, Bailey and Willow.
See, I like all of those names.
They're all nice, but just, it's nice to have something a little bit different.
Like Rex.
Like Rex. Well, I see Rex is a more traditional name. It's sort of gone out of fashion. Diane's been in touch saying our beautiful 9-year-old spaniel is called Stevie G, after Steven Gerrard. Although my partner is a Brighton season ticket holder and I'm a Palace fan. So why you've gone for Stevie G, I don't know. It's nice, though.
Will has 7 dogs. He calls them Smokey-O, Scruffy, Chilling, Beans, Sausage, Kipper, and wait for it, Donald Trump.
Have you got...
The weird and wonderful dog names.
The Donald Trump one is Ginger.
Apparently that dog's Ginger, yeah.
Yeah, but Kipper, Sausage and Beans, have you got a breakfast?
There's a breakfast theme going on.
Anyway, there you go. Let's get a check on the weather for you with Alex.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Pretty frosty out there again for most of us. A bit more cloud across the north and the east, making for a grey and breezy day here. Some places have avoided a frost thanks to that increasing cloud, which is also bringing a few light showers over southeast Scotland, northeast England, pretty scattered, fairly light and of rain rather than any snow. For the south, we've got a beautiful winter's day to look at, but it is cold and there's a brisk wind blowing here as well. That wind, wherever you've got it, across the south or the northeast, really bringing a chill. Lighter winds to western Scotland, some good spells of sunshine on the west coast here. Through this evening, pretty quickly, where we've got the clear skies, the frost comes back. The cloud, though, sticking around over northern England. We'll see a bit more of it spreading to North Wales, northwest England, times through Northern Ireland and across central and southern Scotland. And again, with more cloud overnight, that should help to prevent a frost. But a frosty night across the Highlands and again in the south, -1, -2, even in towns and cities. Rural spots a little lower than that. So again, a chilly day on Thursday, quite a cloudy one over parts of the Midlands, Wales, northern England and southern and eastern Scotland. Again, the sunniest skies, probably the west coast of Scotland, southernmost parts of England and Wales. But for most, it's a dry day. That breeze bringing a chill along the east coast and along the south coast, and temperatures mostly around or touch below average at 6 or 7 Celsius.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. Very nearly 9 o'clock on Wednesday, the 10th of January. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Isabel.
And these are the stories we've been reporting on this morning. Rishi Sunak's leadership's facing yet another major challenge as he faces his first Prime Minister's questions of the year. 30 Tory MPs want amendments that toughen up the Prime Minister's flagship Rwanda policy. Earlier, we spoke to one of these rebels, Danny Kruger. Here's what he had to say.
We want to restrict further the opportunity for vexatious lawyers to make spurious claims on behalf of illegal migrants before they can be removed.
More developments regarding the post office scandal. The tech expert who built the faulty Horizon system and gave evidence used to convict hundreds of postmasters demands immunity before agreeing to appear at a public inquiry.
And the disgraced former post office boss, Paula Vanells, is facing calls to return bonuses reportedly worth millions of pounds after giving up her gong following a huge public outcry.
The gritters are out to keep the country moving in the big freeze. We'll bring you a special report which you can see on gbnews.com.
Start our winter service back in October. We fill the salt barns, so they're ready to go. We've done about 13 or 14 runs since October, but looking at the week ahead, you're right, the snow is coming and the temperatures have dropped.
And we've got Met Office updates for you all throughout the programme with Alex Deakin.
There's a bit more cloud around today, particularly in the northeast, with 1 or 2 scattered showers. Sunny for some, cold for all. Join me later for a full forecast.
Inbox has been bursting this morning. It's always good to hear from you. It's plenty of time to get in touch as well. Just drop us an email, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, Rishi Sunak is set to face yet another showdown over his Rwanda scheme as dozens of his MPs are threatening to vote against the policy.
Well, more than 30 Conservative MPs have backed amendments to prevent European judges and human rights lawyers from blocking deportation flights.
Leading the rebels is the former Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, who's warned that the stakes could not be higher for Britain.
Well, the bill going back to the Commons next week. So just how much of a problem could this be for Rishi Sunak?
Well, earlier we heard from one of those 30 Tory rebels, Danny Kruger.
We really welcome the steps the government's taken. The legislation that was in place before, sadly, wasn't strong enough to withstand the assaults on it from the legal profession, and this bill is a lot better. We're disapplying much of the European human rights framework that meant that the flights to Rwanda haven't taken off so far. And speeding up the process. So it is a very good bill, and there's now this treaty in place with Rwanda which should set people's mind at rest as well. So that's the first thing. But yes, we do think there needs to be some tightening, and the government has said that it's prepared to listen to suggestions for that. So last night a group of us tabled some amendments that we think will add to the protections that the policy needs to ensure that parts of the Human Rights Act which would currently allow the courts to stop the policy should be disapplied, in our view. And we want to restrict further the opportunity for vexatious lawyers to make spurious claims on behalf of illegal migrants before they can be removed. We do have to have absolute protections for human rights. Please understand that. And our legal system does allow that. The problem is there are too many loopholes in the current law which have meant that we can't defend our borders by insisting that anybody who arrives here illegally is swiftly detained and removed.
Well, going through all the politics of the day will be Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner in Britain's Newsroom at 9:30, and they're here now. What do you make of all of this? I mean, it's interesting hearing Danny Kruger saying, look, there's just too many loopholes here. But the argument is Rishi Sunak claims he's closed all the loopholes.
Yeah, but it doesn't appear he has. And these people like Danny Kruger, we're talking to Miriam Cates as well, who's one of his allies in the programme a little later, they say there should be no appeals. if the decision is to deport, out. And they certainly don't want European judges getting involved. And I think they're right about that. We don't even know the nationality of the European judge that blocked the deportation flight to Rwanda, what was it, 18 months ago. Don't know their name, their identity. How is that accountable? And what is wrong with British judges having the final say?
Well, British judges have said that Rwanda isn't a safe country, and even if these amendments did go through, the Lords would probably vote it down.
It's not quite what they said.
It's not about a sovereignty issue. Would it even go through?
It's not about safety, Israel. It's about whether or not they're confident that Rwanda won't send them back to the country they came from.
The risk of défoulement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, but he's got a big problem because he's made this one of his 5 key pledges, which he shouldn't have, frankly. I'm stopping the votes. He didn't say some of them, stopping the votes.
I mean, I have to say that you can understand why a lot of people, and particularly, we know, red wall seats.
Yeah.
You know, and they get annoyed by the whole issue. But then this idea of these pyjama injunctions, some judge being woken up in the middle of the night in his gym jams going, oh, no, it's not allowed.
Yeah.
Phone down.
He's never been to Rwanda.
There's no point pushing this policy through unless it is going to be nailed down, because it will just drag on and on and on. And people are so tired of this issue dragging on. And do you know what I've learned in the last 24 hours is when Parliament want to do something, boy, can they do it. Where there is a will, there is a way. And I'm talking about the post office scandal and how that has galvanised everybody, and with nobody voting against the fact that these people who've been found guilty of crimes they did not commit will be exonerated. Just amazing what they can do when they want to.
Cross-party, isn't it? Who's going to be voted against?
I know.
But we've been speaking to Charlie Rowley this morning, former advisor to Michael Gove, and he made an interesting point, also linking the two stories, saying, look, governments make mistakes. Look what a mess has been made with this post office scandal. If we take away the right for individual appeals on these Rwanda flights, who's to say we won't be sending people back who could then face human rights abuses?
But how many appeals will there be, Isabel? How many appeals? This system is bedevilled by appeals. How can it still be? 20-odd months ago, Parliament voted to send these flights to Rwanda, and a plane hasn't done. They should have sent the plane and said to the European Court, to hell. They should have put the plane in the air. That's what they should have done, and then see what happens.
Take off this side of the election?
Well, it's a big problem for Rishi if they don't, and it's still why I think it's a possibility we get a summer election, because they don't want to risk, if the planes aren't going to Rwanda, hundreds of boats crossing the channel every day in a mild summer.
I've been saying May the 2nd.
Yeah.
Despite what I think Rishi Sunak's sort of trying to put the blinders on.
Never believe a Prime Minister says there won't be an election in such and such. They all fib.
I just don't think there's going to be enough good news for Rishi Sunak by May. Why would he? I can't see anything.
It could be worse.
They'll argue something may turn up, but something may turn up which is even worse. Inflation may start going back the wrong way. The economic recovery could stall, and it's not much of a recovery anyway.
It's just going to be as your programme ends, which is a shame, because I bet you'd love it. But PMQs today.
Yeah. And we've got a new show today. We've got Gloria Di Piero and Christopher Hope doing a new PMQ show today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that.
You don't get that memo? No, we didn't know till about 5 minutes ago either, but but it will be great. Gloria's here in the building. They're going to be down in Westminster.
And it's a big day, because we think that's where the Prime Minister is going to announce the mechanism by which they are going to finally give these postmen and women the pardon they deserve.
But how even with that, there are concerns about a sort of joint quashing, an
sort of blanket ban,
rather than individuals. And there's issues about whether there is anyone who actually did do something wrong.
One might have.
One or two. Which I sort of think, well, just who cares?
Yeah.
But also, will they feel there is the right sense of justice if their individual case hasn't been looked at?
No, I don't think they will. And I've talked to some of these men and women, and they say, no, we want the court to hear our case and clear us individually rather than a royal
long.
Well, that's part of the problem.
To do it en masse.
I know.
And they're also possibly updating us on whether private prosecution rules could change
They've
forever.
got to, because the Post Office abused this. They abused it. There was a simple breach here. Could these post offices IT systems be accessed remotely? They could. And yet in court, we were told they couldn't, which is why they found against them.
Yes, but then it's this IT guy, you know, the guy who designed the software.
Impunity.
Yeah.
Outrageous.
He wants impunity, which is unbelievable. I mean, if that's not the sort of suggestion that maybe he's got, you know, something that he maybe knew or turned a blind eye, I'm not saying...
His evidence was used in almost all the cases that wrongfully convicted those 700 or so. And the idea that in a statutory inquiry where you are legally compelled to give evidence, that he can make demands when he's so key to this story is outrageous,
I must have an amnesty from prosecution. Well, the chairman of the inquiry, Sir Wynne, whatever his name is, has said no, and that's absolutely right. And he's got to go and give evidence.
Yeah, quite right.
And if there should be criminal prosecutions in this. I'm not saying him, but there should be criminal prosecution because the law has been used against these people, and we know that the post office knew there was a problem with this system, and so does Fujitsu. When are they going to cough up?
Quite right, not the taxpayer. I think it should be Fujitsu that picks up
they've got
the
to at least some of the tab on all of this, I think. I had a point I was going to make, and I've forgotten entirely.
What else?
No, I was just going to ask you. Because you two I like having a discussion with you. We don't normally get this long. It's nice. Paula Venables, right, she's handed back her CBE. She wasn't in charge throughout the whole time this was going on, but some of it, and she was, apparently, wasn't paying enough attention to it all. There's now demands for her to hand back pension, bonuses, all the rest of it. Now, I sort of think, is that reaching a vindictive point or not?
No, because were her bonuses predicated on the fact that they clawed all this money back from these postmen and women, which would have run to millions?
Yeah.
So were the books cooked, in a sense, on the back of these postmen and women, affecting her bonus? She should give the money back.
Well, I think it is a little vindictive,
Well, flog her house,
there's never any risk of him drowning in the milk of human kindness, is there?
No, that's true.
I think it is a little vindictive. The other thing that I do wonder, this is clearly a lot of people who are culpable here. And I don't like it when there's just one person.
She was the boss.
I hate to say it, it's often the women in these who get hung out to dry.
She was the boss.
She was the boss, I understand
and
that.
And she was getting performance-related bonuses to the tune of possibly, I've read some papers, £6 million.
But I think it could be a little bit of tokenism is to have her swinging up from this giant hook. Anyway, we've got that and loads more.
Yeah, well, we look forward to it. Thank you.
We'll see you in a bit.
Thank you. It'll be a good show.
Now, better internet sounds great, but is it worth the cost of a telegraph pole outside your house? I'll tell you more in a minute.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Now, despite a surge in puppy smuggling, animal welfare charities are complaining that the government really just isn't tackling the issue. Tickling the issue.
Not tickling, no. Well, listen, this isn't just about smuggling puppies, it's also kittens. They've been brought into the UK and it has actually become a lucrative business model ever since the demand for pets surged during the pandemic.
Yeah, the animals often suffer terrible conditions in transit and to be sold here in the UK. Well, Jeff Moody has been finding out just how widespread the issue is.
The RSPCA says it's delighted. Legislation to tackle pet theft, puppy, kitten and ferret smuggling, as well as the import of dogs with cropped ears, had been kicked into the long grass. But it's back, thanks to North Devon MP Selene Saxby.
Puppy smuggling was something that became a huge issue during the pandemic and it hit my inbox regularly. It's been a campaign that's been run by the Dogs Trust, the RSPCA and others right the way through, and anyone looking back on my social media will see I've been supportive of it the whole way through. I know it's popular and it's popular almost with everybody. It's not a bill that I think will be contentious.
It's a private member's bill. MPs can add their names to a ballot and the successful bids get to present new legislation before the House. Government's Kept Animals Bill had been scrapped, but thanks to Selene Saxby and her private member's bill, at least part of the legislation has a chance to become law, something Becky Bristow from the Dogs Trust thinks is needed.
There has literally never been a more important time for the enforcement of animal welfare. For us, obviously, that's in relation to dogs. More and more dogs are being purchased. They're being purchased online. And just no traceability because people understand. They understand that they need to be able to protect the breeding females and know where their puppies are coming from.
Importing puppies into the UK is a lucrative business. Smugglers can sell their puppies much cheaper online and often take the dogs from their mothers too young. They're not vaccinated and can come across to the UK in appalling conditions. All sorts of health issues can affect them. More than 66,000 dogs were commercially imported to the UK last year, according to Animal and Plant Health Agency figures. Border authorities say they've seen a 260% increase in the number of young puppies being intercepted at customs. 69% of UK adults say more needs to be done to stop the practice. Selene Saxby's right, it's popular.
It's a huge privilege and I am very, very grateful to have come high in the ballot. I'm not normally lucky in ballots, so it is a huge opportunity and it's a remarkable thing when I talk to colleagues who've had the opportunity to have legislation laid in their name. It is something I'm very much looking forward to and I very much hope that we can get it over the line before we get to an election.
The bill is due to be read at the beginning of next month. After that, it will wend its way through the Lords before possibly becoming law. And with a general election looking unlikely before the autumn, the hope is it won't be long before the practice is stamped out forever. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Cute. I could just look at pictures of puppies all day. So sweet.
Saying that, I'm going to have to... Mind you, but Rex is now properly house-trained. I was going to have to go home and pick up the stuff, but I won't actually now.
Mm.
He's all right, be desperate
Whereas
for a week.
my well-trained kitten, who was using the litter box, we're trying to get him to go outside now, and that transition... I mean, my husband caught the kitten using the litter bag, which we'd sort of thought we'd put away. So bless him, he was trying to do the right thing. He'd gone, where am I supposed to go? And we're like, outside. We found the bag of litter and went in the litter.
It takes a while. We get there in the end, though.
Potty training.
Third time.
No, no, never again.
Now, here's an interesting one. Broadband telegraph poles have been popping up across the UK to give us better access to the internet.
Well, it sounds great, but would you want one of these outside your house? The telecommunications companies no longer need to ask councils for permission to install these broadband poles, and they're not required to use existing underground cabling.
They wouldn't be all that close together, though. That's very odd. I don't quite know where that is.
Wow.
That's a little bit over the top. Anyway, it's caused a lot of anger amongst campaign groups across the country. But can we let the NIMBYs win? Well, not if you want fast broadband.
Anna Riley is in Beverley, just outside Hull this morning. Good morning to you, Anna. What's the mood there? Is it sort of NIMBY-tastic?
Good morning. Well, yes, I'm here at the East Riding of Yorkshire Council offices, where later today a motion will be put forward looking into this broadband issue. It's had the group Stop Underground, Going Underground group up in arms, not just here in Hull and East Yorkshire, but also across the country. And this is because new companies are coming into areas to, like you say, offer more competitive broadband rates, but instead of using existing underground cabling, they're putting up their own telegraph poles for each different company to offer that internet. But people that live in these areas say that these poles are unsightly, they feel that they're unnecessary, they feel like they block the pavement that people walk past, and especially in quaint Georgian towns like Headlight, places like Beverley, they say it upsets the whole feel and look of the town by putting up these telegraph poles. Now, this council meeting this afternoon, there's going to be a protest held by the Going Underground group here, and they want to back a council petition where the council will be asking Ofcom to look into this. They're the ones that regulate these broadband poles, to see if there can be more infrastructure sharing and to see if prices can be more transparently put out there, to see if people really are getting the best rates. I spoke to Julie Dervey, she's the Going Underground campaigner, and this is what she had to say.
Never realised initially that this was happening everywhere. I've heard since from places like Greenock in Scotland, Birmingham, Oldham, Manchester, Liverpool, Sheffield, Braintree in Essex, where this is happening. There's just a proliferation of telegraph poles going up all over the place without public consultation, and it really isn't good enough. We don't want our places to look like we're going back in time. These telegraph poles were developed in the late 1800s, I believe. We don't need them 100 and something years later.
That's what Julie says as a campaigner, but this is what the broadband companies have said. The two involved in East Riding are MS3, who have not given a comment to us, and the other one is Connexis. They've said that they have worked with the council and local communities to find the best place for these broadband poles. In a statement, Connexis said, when building, we're always driven to minimise disruption to communities, and therefore our preference is to limit the use of new infrastructure wherever possible when building our super fast broadband network, and where we are able to share ducts and poles, we're already doing so. So that's what the broadband companies say. But this afternoon, a protest is going to be held here, but it's also going to be held across the country. Julie mentioning there other areas affected, such as Birmingham, Essex. They're all going to be coming out, standing outside their council offices and getting them to petition to do the same, to conduct this emergency market review by Ofcom to try and stop these poles being put in place if they're not entirely necessary.
OK, Anna, thanks very much indeed. It's how necessary they are. You've got to share infrastructure, and if there are underground conduits already there, why wouldn't you just do that? I don't know. But then again, you've got to have the fast internet. We all need it.
We all need it. We do indeed. We've been talking doggy names this morning. It's got you all going. The inbox has been on fire. Oh, look, this is Bodhi, apparently. Alana says it's her daughter's dog. He's a Borodor. I haven't heard of a Borodor before. It's a mix between a Merle Collie and a Labrador. And he is a most delightful friend. Oh, sweet.
And we'll leave you with Wilfred from Jackie, who is, what is he, a Basset? Something like that. Gorgeous. We'll see you tomorrow at 6.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Pretty frosty out there again for most of us. A bit more cloud across the north and the east, making for a grey and breezy day here. Some places have avoided a frost thanks to that increasing cloud, which is also bringing a few light showers over southeast Scotland, northeast England, pretty scattered, fairly light and of rain rather than any snow. For the south, we've got a beautiful winter's day to look at, but it is cold and there's a brisk wind blowing here as well. That wind, wherever you've got it, across the south or the northeast, really bringing a chill. Lighter winds to western Scotland, some good spells of sunshine on the west coast here. Through this evening, pretty quickly, where we've got the clear skies, the frost comes back. The cloud, though, sticking around over northern England. We'll see a bit more of it spreading to North Wales, northwest England, times through Northern Ireland and across central and southern Scotland. And again, with more cloud overnight, that should help to prevent a frost. But a frosty night across the Highlands and again in the south, -1, -2, even in towns and cities. Rural spots a little lower than that. So again, a chilly day on Thursday, quite a cloudy one over parts of the Midlands, Wales, northern England and southern and eastern Scotland. Again, the sunniest skies, probably the west coast of Scotland, southernmost parts of England and Wales. But for most, it's a dry day. That breeze bringing a chill along the east coast and along the south coast, and temperatures mostly around or touch below average at 6 or 7 Celsius.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is,